Darn it.
Recording in progress.
Okay, Mr. Marshall,
Whoa.
you have a quorum of the board. I believe I started the recording, although now I'm looking for the little dot and I don't see it. Nate, do you see it? Oh, here it is. Yep. Okay,
do.
we are recording. Amherst Media is with us in the house. It's 6:35. I think you're good to go.
All right, thanks, Pam.
You're welcome.
Welcome to the Amherst Planning Board meeting of March 19th, 2025. My name is Doug Marshall, and as chair of the Amherst Planning Board, I am calling this meeting to order at 6:34 p.m. This meeting is being recorded and is available live stream via Amherst Media. Minutes are being taken. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021 and extended by Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this planning board meeting, including public hearings, will be conducted via remote means using the Zoom platform. The Zoom meeting link is accessible on the meeting agenda posted on the town website's calendar listing for this meeting, or go to the planning board webpage and click on the most recent agenda, where the Zoom link is listed at the top of the page. No in-person attendance of the public is permitted. However, every effort will be made to ensure the public can adequately access the meeting in real time via technological means. In the event we are unable to do so for reasons of economic hardship or despite best efforts, we will post an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting on the town's website. Board members, I am taking a roll call. When I call your name, unmute yourself, answer affirmatively, and return to mute. Bruce Colden.
I am here.
Fred Hartwell.
I am here.
We know that Lawrence Klutz will be absent this evening. Jesse Major.
Present.
I, Doug Marshall, am present. Johanna Newman.
Here.
And Karen Winter.
Here.
Thank you all. Board members, if technical issues arise, we will pause to address the problem and then continue the meeting. If the discussion needs to pause, it will be noted in the minutes. Please use the raise hand function to ask a question or make a comment, and I will call on you to speak. After speaking, remember to remute yourself. To the general public. The general public comment item is reserved for public comment regarding items not on tonight's agenda. Please be aware the board will not respond to comments during the general public comment period. Public comment may also be heard at other times during the meeting when deemed appropriate by the planning board chair. Please indicate you wish to make a comment by clicking the raise hand button when public comment is solicited. If you have joined the Zoom meeting using a telephone, please indicate you wish to make a comment by pressing *9 on your phone. When called on, please identify yourself by stating your full name and address, and put yourself back into mute when finished speaking. Residents can express their views for up to 3 minutes or at the discretion of the planning board chair. If a speaker does not comply with these guidelines or exceeds their allotted time, their participation may be disconnected from the meeting. Okay, time is 6:37, and our first agenda item is approval of minutes. We have the minutes from January 22nd of this year available. It was in our packet. Hope you all had a chance to review it. Are there any comments on these minutes? No comments. Bruce.
I move acceptance of the minutes as presented, January 22nd.
Thank you. Johanna?
I second the motion.
Thank you. One last chance for comments? All right, we'll go through a roll call, starting with you, Bruce
Aye.
and Fred.
Aye.
And Jesse.
Aye.
Johanna
Aye.
and Karen.
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. That's 6 in favor, 1 member absent. The motion carries. Thank you all. All right, time now is 6:38, and we'll go to the public comment period for this meeting. Let's see. I usually read the names of the attendees, and I hope you'll bear with me. I see 52 attendees this evening. So if all of these are for one of our later hearings, then we may need to reduce the time allotted for comment during public comment period on that agenda item. So I'll start with the listing of the attendees. I'll start with Stella Knepp, and then Alice Swift, and then Ari Knepp, and then Barry Roberts, Bill Loeb, Kai-Ping Yao, Carol McNeary, Chris Conlon, Chris Hoke or Hotch, Christine Brestrup, Claire's iPhone, Debbie Jacques, Donna Mollard, Dylan Barstow, Mans, Ed Wingerbach, someone with just EME, Gail Flood, Gary's iPhone, Geneva Schmidt, Grace Brown, Jay Wang, Jason Dorney, John Deneen, Jonathan Salvon, Jonathan Podolsky, Jory Harbor, just Catherine, Katie Naughton, Ken Rosenthal, Kyle, Larry Hansen, Li Zhang twice, Lisa Juris, Lorna Hunt, Maria Kopicki, Mary Hoke, Maura Keene, Mike Bowen, Mingo Hong, M.M. Mitch, Nancy Eddy, Patio, Paul Juris, Peter Straley, Rachel's iPad, number 2, Sandy, Sherry Wilson, Skin, Steve Roof, S. Wood, Tom Reedy, and Uta. All right, so this is the time for public comment for items that are not on our agenda later. So if you are here to comment on any of the hearings we will be conducting later, this is not the time to talk. Please wait for us to get to that item on the agenda. Anybody else who has a comment about something not on the agenda, now's the time to raise your hand. So having read those names and had that brief monologue, no one has raised their hand, and I'm going to assume there are no general public comment items at this time. All right. Time now is 6:42. We can go to the next item on the agenda. All right, we will start with this public hearing. This is a continuation of a public hearing. In accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, this public hearing has been duly advertised and notice thereof has been posted and is being held for the purpose of providing the opportunity for interested citizens to be heard regarding SPR 2024-11, U Drive Amity LLC, University Drive at Amity Street. This hearing has been continued from the following dates: August 7th, September 18th, November 6th, and December 18th of 2024, and then January 22nd and February 19th of this year. Request site plan review approval under section 3.325 of the zoning bylaw to redevelop existing commercial space into an 85-unit residential and commercial space mixed-use development, including parking, landscape, lighting, and stormwater infrastructure. Parcel 13B, 18, 27, 28, 54, all in the BL zoning district. Do we have any board member disclosure this evening? All right. Pam, it looks like you've brought Tom and Barry over to join us.
I did.
I just want to say that for the record, Johanna and Karen have completed an affidavit saying that they've watched video and caught up on the one meeting they missed, so they're able to vote on this project. And so
All
they
right.
submitted that form to staff prior to tonight's meeting.
All right, thank you, Manate. Welcome back, Tom. I'm not sure you need to give us much of an intro, but perhaps you can tell us what has happened since the last time we met with you.
Sure. So for the record, Tom Reedy, Turner with Bacon Wilson out of Amherst, here on behalf of View Drive Amity. With me this evening, Barry Roberts of View Drive Amity. So as you'll recall, in February, the board went through findings and voted for those conditions, voted for those. The outstanding item was to receive approval from the Zoning Board of Appeals on a variance modification. We were in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals last Thursday and received a unanimous approval for that variance modification. So we've got the approvals that we need, save for your hopefully affirmative vote tonight. One other smallish piece, and I'll just share my screen briefly to show you just an updated site plan. If you're seeing my screen, you should see, again, just to orient everyone, the north is on the right, Amity Street's there, University Drive's here, page down on the east. In this area right here, this was a 20-foot wide access way, and in talking with the building commissioner, he had suggested that we reduce this to 12 feet wide and to make it the same material as what's happening in the kind of pedestrian path. And so that's what we've done. And I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see. That's what we've done down here. We've actually increased green space, reduced the amount of pervious pavement. And then we've also built in what the town engineer had asked for at that bus pull off. So that's the only change to the plans. I had submitted this to Nate, I want to say maybe yesterday or the day before. So I apologize for the late date of getting it to you, but we could have done it post decision, but we thought might as well do it pre-decision. We think it's a good change. So that's the only change that's been made.
All right, and am I correct? You are finished with the Conservation Commission?
We are, yes. And we've received the order of conditions from them.
Okay. All right, so board members, we went in great detail through findings and conditions at the February meeting. So I guess this one change is the only change to the documents previously submitted. And you've all had the findings and conditions as updated based on the conversation a month ago in your packet. So I'm expecting this to go relatively quickly, but you never know. Bruce, you have your hand up.
Yes, I see what Tom has shown us, which is the only change from what we saw last week. I think I understand that in what he was saying, but this could have been probably granted as an administrative, granted administratively by the building commissioner as a de minimis change, but he's just folding it in, and that would be the way I would regard it. So I don't think that represents anything that would change what we've already deliberated upon and essentially drafted so far as findings and conditions are concerned. So I would move acceptance of the or granting the requested permits, and then of course citing the project with the following with the findings as developed by the board at our February meeting, with conditions as developed by the board, or reviewed by the board, I should say, at our February meeting, and with the waivers. And then I can't list those waivers, but I think
Well,
if Nate could help me with that, there are
Bruce?
certain waivers, and then close the public hearing.
good. So we do have the revised findings and conditions, which in our packets are listed as revised as of March 13th.
Oh,
And so I would
cite
offer a
those.
friendly amendment that we refer to them that way.
Yes, thank you. I frankly, I didn't look at them because I thought I knew what they were, but I didn't see
Right.
the revised part of it.
And the conditions list the waivers that are required. So I think we could refer to the waivers as listed in the conditions.
Again, I accept that as a friendly amendment to the
Okay.
motion as declared.
And then closing the hearing. Okay.
And I guess maybe
So-
I would just ask before that, if you want to open, it is a public hearing. I don't know if you're going to ask if anybody has. I just
Yep.
want to touch that base.
Well, thank you, Tom.
I
Members
bet
of
he
the
hadn't
public,
forgotten.
members of the public, do any of you want to make a comment on this this particular application? And board members, I haven't seen any other hands from you either. So maybe if we get any public comments, I'll take them first. But otherwise, I'll go right to Johanna. You're
Great.
on.
Thank you. If a member of the public, moves in, I'd be interested in recognizing that, but I would second Bruce's motion.
Okay. And Pam, did we cobble the motion together well enough for you to record it as though it happened relatively coherently?
It did happen very coherently. I have it.
Okay,
Mhm.
great.
You're too kind.
It's the bandana, Bruce. Okay, all right. So in that case, we can go ahead and vote on this motion. I'll go reverse alphabetical this time. We'll start with you, Karen.
I approve.
Thank you. And Johanna,
Aye.
Jesse,
Aye.
Fred,
Aye.
and Bruce.
I approve.
Great, and I do as well. That is 6 in favor, 1 absence. So SPR 2024 is -11 is approved.
Thank you very much.
Findings and conditions. Thank you all and good luck. We can't wait to see your project.
Thank you.
Okay. And now the project that 58 people are waiting for.
I'm done.
All right, the time is 6:51. In accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law 40A, this public hearing has been duly advertised and notice thereof has been posted and is being held for the purpose of providing the opportunity for interested citizens to be heard regarding SPR 2025-08 and SPP 2025-01. Archipelago Investments LLC, Gould Way and Lannon Lane. Request site plan review approval under section 3.325 of the zoning bylaw to construct a new mixed-use development with 3 buildings, including 140 residential units, approximately 12,000 square feet of commercial space, 180 parking spaces, and associated site improvements, and request a special permit under footnote A of Table 3, Article 6 of the zoning bylaw to modify the front setback beyond the maximum required building height to exceed the maximum allowed, and the number of floors to exceed the maximum allowed. This is in the BBC Village Center Business Zoning District, located at map 25B, parcels 52 and 58. So are there any board member disclosures? I do not see any hands raised. In that case, Pam, I guess, are you going to be bringing anyone over to make the applicant?
I am, yes.
I think
I'm
I saw Kyle.
I did see Kyle. Takes me a minute to go through all these names. Kyle, if you can raise your hand. Ah. Who's this? Brings you to the top.
Yeah.
Here we are. Not panelist.
Nate, are you going to want to introduce this at all, or shall we go right to Kyle?
We can go right to Kyle. I don't have much to say.
Okay.
Kyle, is there anyone else that's going to join you this evening?
No.
No. Okay.
All
So,
right. Welcome, Kyle.
thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the time. We've obviously been working on this project for a number of years, and we're excited to finally be presenting it to the planning board. With that, I want to share my screen. Let me figure out how to do that. And let me do this. I wanted to open the presentation with a macro view of housing in general, and then zoom into our site in particular. I have about 12 slides here to kind of set the table for what we're working on. The first slide has a couple of recent posts. The one on the left shows the typical home value across the Northeast. And you can see how the home values around New York City and Boston, how high they are. The image on the right shows domestic migration into and out of the 50 largest metros in the country. And what you see at the bottom of the list is New York City, where there's hundreds of thousands of people leaving New York City every year. And a little further up, you see Boston, Cambridge, Newton, where you see between 10 and 40,000 people, 45,000 people leaving Boston every year. And you can see that, as everyone knows, we're 2 hours from Boston and 3 hours from New York City. Massachusetts has the lowest rental vacancy rate of any state in the country. We're at 2.5% as of 23. The average across all 50 is 6.5%. Couple of posts that show the change from October of 2016 to 2024 in terms of average single-family home price in Connecticut, Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island. You can see that there's doubling of prices in almost all of those states. And then you'll see below, in between 1960 and 1990, Massachusetts permitted 900,000 new homes and added 868 residents. And then the subsequent 34 years added only 490 homes while adding 1,000,001 residents. And at the same time, the average household size dropped from 3.3 to 2.5, which means Massachusetts is the most expensive state in the country to raise a child. And the number one contributing factor to that is housing. Massachusetts is the second most expensive state in the country to support a family of four, behind only Hawaii. And again, housing is the main culprit. This is a recent UMass Amherst political poll that identifies the most important political issue in the Commonwealth of Mass. And the big word in the middle is housing. And that is why last month, Governor Healy put out two different, very important plans. The first is the very first comprehensive housing plan that's ever been created for the entire Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And the second is a plan for unlocking housing production. And as you'll see, they're both released in February of 2025. When housing is the most important political issue, these reports become more important. And Governor Healy was in Amherst back in November of 23. She was talking about democracy, which unfortunately we're living through some of the things she was talking through right now. And she was also talking about housing. And this is why. From 1987 to 2024, the average home price went from 164,000 to over 600,000. And you can see the upward swing that has occurred since 2017. So the average single-family home in Amherst is $600,000 in rough numbers, so that we can all kind of take it in. That's $5,000 a month as the table stakes to get a single-family home, the average single-family home in Amherst. We have 11,000 housing units in Amherst right now. It went up from 7,700 back in 1980 to just under 11,000 back in 2020. And as of February of this month, there is a broad recognition that Amherst needs about 5,000 more housing units in town, which is a massive increase, an increase of almost 50% to the total housing stock. 5,000 housing units is a lot of housing units. 5,000 housing units would result in a lot of tax revenue. But the issue we have is, where could we possibly build those housing units? The single-family home market has been built in Amherst. The ability to build additional single-family homes is extremely limited. And so our housing future, unless conservation land is opened up, which nobody is advocating for, is multifamily. Multifamily is more dense and therefore more sustainable. There's more units per acre, and there's more tax revenue per acre. This is our table 3 in our zoning bylaw with a couple of additional markups. Multifamily is apartments and mixed-use buildings. Apartments and mixed-use buildings are allowed in a number of districts. Those districts, as you'll see from the acreage up top, are quite small. There's almost 18,000 acres in all of Amherst. And if you add up all of the acreage of the zoning districts that allow apartments and mixed use, you have less than 2% of the total land mass available for the multifamily that we need to build 5,000 housing units on. Our project is in BVC, which has a little pink star on it. And what you'll also see is the additional lot area per family. So the additional lot area per family limits density on a site. So anything that's highlighted in yellow is limited to either 4 units per acre, if it's 10,000 units, 10,000 square feet additional lot area per family, or 10 units per acre, which impacts RVC, BL, and COM. And we all know how much housing has been built in those districts recently. So less than 2% of Amherst is zoned for apartments or mixed use by right. And the contrast on this map could be a little better, but less than 0.7% of Amherst is zoned for mixed use by right at densities greater than 10 units per acre. What we're proposing is approximately 20 units per acre. So that is our BG district downtown and our BVC districts in our village centers. There's also BN further east towards East Amherst. But again, less than 1% of our total land mass is the zoning where we can hope to add the units that we need to add in order to reduce the impact of this cost curve that we're faced with. So in the comprehensive housing plan that Governor Healy's office put out, there are a couple parts that we pulled out of that to highlight. First, the housing crisis is a long time coming. It's 50 years in the making, where our production has been lower than it should be. The shortage of homes is the root cause of the housing cost crisis. So we have limited options for new construction. And the number one proposed solution to that is to increase as of right zoning capacity for multifamily housing. If you look back at our zoning bylaw, you can see that we have that issue. We don't have enough ability to build the homes we need to lower the cost curve. The Unlocking Housing Production report that Governor Healy's office also put out showed the number of new housing units permitted annually from 1960 to present. And you can see that long-term trend getting lower and lower. And one of the first recommendations under land use and zoning was to eliminate parking minimums, which has happened across the country in other cities and towns that are also dealing with housing crisis similar to ours. So onto our site. Our site is in South Amherst. It is zoned BVC. It is on the west and the south of Atkins Market. This image is from 1962, before Atkins, before Hampshire, and shows the extent of the apple orchards in South Amherst, which led to Atkins, obviously, and shows our site, which was a very active orchard. This will come up because the entire site is contaminated with lead arsenic. The lead arsenic was used as a pesticide in the orchards. The lead arsenic, through our testing, has shown to be deployed in a standard manner. So it was used as it should have been at the time for pesticides, but it results in the fact that in order to redevelop this site for any residential use or any use that includes residential, 12 inches of soil needs to be removed from the entire site. This is a survey of the site. It shows the two parcels adjacent to one another. One is 4.9 acres, the other is 2.7 acres. And there is a wetland that is between them. Gould Way and Lannon were added when the roundabouts were done 10 plus years ago. And the hammerhead at Lannon for the future extension, you'll see we've accommodated that to make a connection out to Rambling. This is the soil analysis that we've done. We took over 100 samples for metal to see how much lead arsenic was on the site, and we took 8 samples for pesticides. Again, this analysis showed that there is lead arsenic throughout the site. We subsequently did a couple of test pits in the wetland and showed that there's also lead arsenic in the wetland. As per the 1962 image, that makes sense because the lead arsenic was applied throughout the wetlands. And this is the beginning of the information that was submitted to the planning board for this project. It shows an aerial shot that we took that has Atkins in the foreground with a couple of deliveries coming in. And it shows the 3 buildings of our proposed development. Building 1, if you can see my cursor, is on the right-hand side of the page. Building 2 is in the middle, and building 3 is on the left-hand side of the page. You can also get a sense of the grade change across the site. The intersection of Rambling Road and Bay Road is at 292. The intersection of Gould and Bay Road is down at 269. So there's almost a 25-foot grade drop across Bay Road there, and then it goes back up to the intersection of Gould and Lannon, which is up at 282, and then back down to the intersection of Lannon and West Street 116, which is down near 270. In addition to the site being contaminated with lead arsenic, the groundwater is very high on this site. There are a number of locations where it's within 4 feet of topsoil, and the site is currently not developed. So the stormwater regs in Massachusetts require us to not increase flows off-site with a new development. And you'll see in our civil drawings that the amount of underground storage, retainage, and infiltration that it will take to redevelop the site is very extensive. And with high groundwater, the location of the stormwater retention and infiltration is a key driver to where new buildings can be developed on this site. So you'll see behind the retaining walls and the plantings on the Bay Road and Gould intersection, that is where the stormwater retention and infiltration is located for buildings 1 and 2. And then in the drive aisle that is aligned with the drive aisle in front of Atkins, that ramps up, and underneath that parking lot is where the stormwater infiltration and retention is for building 3. You can also see there's parking along West Street in front of building 3, and then there's 3 trays of parking to the west of that are between building 3 and building 1 and 2. We have a rendering. This is the corner of Gould and Lannon looking to the northwest. And you can start to see how the grades on site start to manifest themselves in the architecture and the ground floor. This is the non-residential portion of the site in building 2. Our entrance to the residential portion is down near the person with a bike on the right-hand side of the image. You can see we've got retaining walls, which we're proposing as gabion walls, which are mesh baskets full of what we hope to be local stone for retaining. And you'll see the walkways that will get us up and along the Wooner over to Rambling Road. The proposed construction methodology of the building is similar to our 47 Olympia project, which is a hybrid mass timber. So the roofs, the ceilings of the units would be exposed wood. There'd be a CLT, which is cross-laminated timber, which is the sandwich of wood that's similar to the John Olver design building at UMass. And then you see the glulam columns that form the colonnade along the non-residential portions on the ground floor of each of the buildings that provide cover, reveal that they are non-residential, and expose the mass timber construction. With the new building code as of July of last year, this project is required to be passive house compliant, which is, one of the strictest energy codes in the country for new construction. So it will be all electric. There'll be solar generation on site, and we have placed all of the mechanical equipment on the roof. This is a site plan that shows building 1, which is L-shaped, building 2, which is rectangular, and building 3, which is rectangular. You can see the connection from Lannon through what the Woonerf, which is a term used to define a street where the street will be rather than asphalt, it'll be pavers. We'll have different paving patterns to slow down visually the vehicles through the site. There'll be parking for residents and for commercial along the Woonerf, and it will form, there's a walkway on the north side of that Woonerf that will connect and offer the ability for the folks west of us, either at Applewood or Hampshire Village, to be able to connect to Atkins without having to go out to Bay Road and walk on a sidewalk. We are proposing a sidewalk along Bay Road in conversations with DPW. We'll have to zig and zag underneath some of the power lines, which are on our property, off our property, and then jump across the road. But the intent is to create through the Woonerf a pedestrian path that is open to the public, where people can transition from Rambling Road to Atkins, which is currently not available through the site. And you'll see this portion of the site between buildings 1 and 2. We hope to be active from a commercial standpoint. And then the north side of building 3, which is facing Atkins, again, to be an active space facing the existing Atkins market. This is a parking diagram where we are showing how the residential parking and the commercial parking could play nicely together. As you'll see on upcoming plans, building 3 on the right is the building that has the most ground floor non-residential associated with it. Building 2, about half of the ground floor is non-residential, and building 1 on the far left has a smaller portion. The parking in blue is for residential. The parking in red is proposed for commercial. We have 12,000 square feet of commercial space, non-residential space, at 3 per thousand per the bylaw. That's 36 spaces. We're showing 63. A function of that is the parking to the east of building 3 is about 40 spaces. We're proposing about 10 or 11 parking spaces along Gould Way, and then 15 spaces approximately as we go up the Woonurf towards Rambling along the Woonurf. That would be commercial. The residential would be marked and would be associated with a lease of an apartment. The commercial would not be marked and would be open to commercial use, and there's an opportunity for some shared parking based on the commercial tenants and when the commercial needs are. So now I'll get into the floor plans for, we've broken up buildings 1 and 2 as one set of drawings and building 3 as another set because they're kind of 2 different sites. So this is building 1, the L-shaped building. This is building 2 along Gould Way. Building 1, the first floor slab is up at 292. Building 2 has 2 different slab heights, and they vary a great deal. One is at 286.5, and one is down at 280. So there's a big grade change in this building to accommodate the grade as it falls down towards Gould. You can see that somewhat if you have a big enough screen or high enough resolution in the stairs that are here. 2-sided elevator. This is the residential lobby. This is a sitting area. This is the gathering area. This is fitness associated with the residential. You can see in the pink, there's a commercial element that has 2 different slab heights here. And you can see this commercial element on the bottom half of building 1. So this portion of the commercial on building 1 is down also at 286.5. It creates this courtyard, paved courtyard and kind of active commercial space around this corner. Also up at 286.5, and that height, 286.5, you'll see, is driven by the need to bury a very significant amount of stormwater retention and infiltration that will occur out in this, the grass area, the cultivated area between buildings 1 and 2. On the ground floor of building 1, there are residential units, so a mix of 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom units here. There's another lobby for the residents here, and then there's maintenance, and the trash for both of these buildings, buildings 1 and 2, are located in the same area so that we can service that through the courtyard in the mornings and then allow the commercial areas to activate that space in the afternoons. You'll also see with these glulam columns that march down on the facade, that's the covered area that highlights the non-residential portions of the site and creates the architecture that you saw in the rendering. These are the upper floors of buildings 1 and 2, which are the same for floors 2, 3, and 4. So the same units you saw on the ground floor are above that in buildings 1, so a mix of 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom. And then we've got a 1-bed and a 1-bed office on the end of that. And then on building 2, we've got a mix of 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units. The 1-bedrooms face Gould and the 2 bedrooms are on either end. What we're doing with the corridors is similar to what we've done with the corridors at 26 Spring Street, where the end of each corridor in every building is full glass, so that when you walk out of your unit and look to the right or left, you'll be able to see outside. And you can also see the required fire stairs and elevators in purple for each of these units or each of these buildings. Again, the 2nd floor, the 3rd floor, and the 4th floor of buildings 1 and 2 are all identical. This is the roof plan for buildings 1 and 2. The roof plan shows all the condensing units for the heating, the all-electric heating and cooling of the units. They'll be with electric hot water, which we've used at 11 East Pleasant downtown, also at 47 Olympia. That will also be on the roof. And for the roof screen, we are proposing photovoltaic panels as opposed to corrugated metal. And the solar generation required on the new energy code is satisfied by making the roof screen 100% photovoltaic panels. This is building 3 and the ground floor of building 3. You'll see there the vast majority of the ground floor is commercial, non-residential. You can see the colonnade that is on the north side and the east side. And you'll see a cultivated area to the south of building 3. The parking, as I discussed, on the east side of the building ramps up from Lannon up to about 8 feet up to the to create an accessible entry into the commercial space. And then the residential portion of the building comes in from the west side. And all of this parking here, the 3 trays, are residential parking only, have its separate entrance. We've obviously had a lot of conversations in the community about housing. We've also begun to have a number of conversations about childcare. And our hope with this site and a very large commercial tenant is that this becomes a childcare facility of some sort. We don't have a tenant yet. We don't know the age of the childcare yet, but we have done what we can to make sure that there's accessibility to the exterior, there's accessibility to a play area on the south, and have a separate parking area to the east of that that would allow for pickup, drop off, and staff parking. And then you can see to the northwest of this building, there's a paved courtyard, which could be shared between the folks that park here and use residential and the folks that are occupying the ground floor tenancy. This is floors 2, 3, and 4 in the roof plan for building 3. So a mix of 1 bed and office, 2 bed and 3 bedroom units, all in this building. Again, the corridors on both ends are glass and wide open. So you come out of your unit and look either way. And again, on the roof plan, we've got an elevator penthouse. We've got solar panels as the mechanical screen and condensing units for heating, cooling, and electric domestic hot water. This is a diagram we put together to work with the board on height and its definition in the bylaw. And on a number of sites that have Rambling Road, Bay Road, Gould Way, Lannon Lane, and West Street, it's 5 different streets, as everyone's aware. The way that height is defined is the average finished grade on the street side of the structure. So we've done the best we can to outline how we've analyzed that and approach that and tried to key that to the elevations, which I'll show you shortly, so that this key shows this elevation, this key shows this elevation, and we can start to discuss how to evaluate the heights here. Again, the intersection of Rambling and Bay Road is up at 293. The intersection of Bay Road and Gould is down at 269, so 24 feet of grade drop. It ramps up 13 feet again back to the intersection of Gould and Lannon, drops down another 14 feet to intersection of Lannon and West Street down at 268. So these are the elevations and the keys and the averages, and those elevations that are on the street side of the structure are shown with the pink elevations shown. So you can see this is the A1 is the elevation of building 2 facing Gould Way. That building has the most internal grade on the ground floor, and the most grade also dropping away from the intersection of Gould and Lannon down to Bay Road. And you can see the average height on the street side of the structure here is 49 foot 8 inches. If you look at, A5 is building 1, and you can see that the average height there is 45 feet 10. If you look at C1, it shows the north elevation of building 2, which shows the grade change between the courtyard, which is up at 286.6 due to stormwater retention, and down at 279.7 or 279.0, on the street side. And that is the big grade stop that you would see in the building between the different uses on the ground floor. And the average height there is 46.11. This is the back side of building 1 and the average height there. And this is the south side of building 1, which is D1. And the average height there is 41 foot 4. Additional elevations of building 3. This is the elevation facing Atkins. So the retaining there, that's actually shown a little bit higher than it is, but the average grade height, the average grade on the street side of the structure is 45 feet for height. And then this is the elevation of the proposed childcare on the ground floor facing east, facing 116, and average height there being 45 feet. The proposed material for the cladding is a thermally modified wood that is called Luna wood. That is, and the reason we chose that is that it's a very low carbon product. It requires limited maintenance. Its colorway is very similar, almost identical to the natural wood siding of Atkins, which we wanted to tie into and which you could see in the renderings. And then you can see the mass timber and how that will look as we're building it and as the units are finished out. So you'll see the glulam timbers on the ground, which are protected here during construction, and then the exposed wood ceilings on the upper floors. These are the unit types and the rough layouts of the apartments themselves. So a 1-bedroom in the lower right, 1-bedroom and office on the upper left, a 2-bedroom on the upper right, and a 3-bedroom on the lower left. As you'll see, every unit has a balcony on this project, and every unit has a kitchen, dining, living, and bedrooms with access to the exterior. Obviously, some of these units are on corners and would have a slightly different layout, but this is a rough layout of the unit type for each of the unit types that we have. This is the landscape plan that shows the entire site, including the wetlands, and shows the retaining walls and very clearly, and starts to show how much retaining is required to, 1, house the stormwater retention, and 2, make all the grades work as we lose 24 feet over this Bay Road elevation. You see the pavers on the south side, the south corner, which is the non-residential commercial corner. You can see the retaining walls on the south side of the residential portion of building 1. On the north side, again, this first floor slab of building 1's up at 292, and this area, this fixed lawn play area, dog run, is down at 286.5, so down almost 5.5 feet from there. You can see there's also retaining on the south corner to make the accessibility work. As this drops away, the grade drops away, going down Gould. As the grade goes up, going up the Lunar, it's pretty significant. And you can see in this ramping that there's a possibility we even need handrails in order to have accessible pedestrian access to make it up and down there. And you can see the handicap parking is proposed in the only location where there's not too much cross slope to allow for handicap parking. So the handicap parking spaces are up here for buildings 1 and 2, and here for building 3. Down at building 3, you can see this also the retaining wall here, which is to manage the grade of Lannon, the ramping up that's going to be required to handle the stormwater that's underneath this parking area, and making sure that the whole first floor of building 3 is accessible. Drilling down into the landscape plan a bit, again, just the lineways, but the retaining walls really pop and start to show how we're working to manage the grade change and make accessible buildings and have accessibility work on all 3 of the buildings. And here again, you can see the ground floor, the retaining walls, the plantings along the public way, new sidewalk that we'd propose on the public way, plantings, and then the plantings around the perimeter, and the paved patio area to the northwest, excuse me. I'll get into the civil, trying to spend too much time, but this is an overall site plan of the civil. It shows the wetland flaggings that are across both parcels. It shows the Wooner going through, it shows the buildings and the retaining walls. This is an existing condition. Again, it shows all the topography of the existing site as it falls away from Rambling down to Atkins, and in particular West Bay Road and Gould Way at that intersection. This shows all the grade as it falls from west to east, from the back of the parcel in the wetlands down to the intersection of Lannon and West Street. This corner of Lannon and West Street was modified pretty significantly with the construction of the roundabouts 10+ years ago, and you can see the the steepness of the grade that was a part of that road work. This is just the site plan and layout. I think what I'll skip to and I'll show you is instead the stormwater retention. So this is the stormwater plan that starts to show the amount of underground Cultec basins that we need in order to manage the required stormwater flows. So that is infiltration, and this is retention. This slows it down, allows it to percolate into the infiltration as it needs to. The catch basins on the parking area that will go underground and piping, the roof drains that will go under, and all end up with in the subsurface stormwater that is held up and retained by this upper retaining wall. You can also start to see how the stormwater starts to work out on this very tricky corner as all the grades kind of come to bear, all the corner of the building comes to bear, and we're trying to stay close enough to be, within the setbacks, but not too close. So one of the dimensional special permits we're seeking is related to the setbacks and attempting to make all of that grading work. And then you'll see on building 3 on the Lannon parcel, again, the subsurface infiltration basins are all underneath this parking. Again, this amount of this infiltration basin location and this infiltration basin location are driven by the only 2 locations on either of these sites where the groundwater is low enough below topsoil to allow us to install stormwater to allow for the development of the site. So you can see that here. We have to ramp up significantly to get up from Lannon up to the parking area, and then obviously this parking to the building has to be fully accessible. So you'll see the subsurface retention basins and the infiltration basin that is here. So going back to the rendering, this is the rendering from the opening screen. You can see, the proposed parking along Gould. You can see this grade falling apart, falling down, and see how we've attempted to manage that architecturally with the colonnade. You can see on building 3, you can see again, there's this colonnade facing east. You can see the separate parking with the landscape buffer going up to get the stormwater retention in. The retaining walls needed to make the ground floor accessible, and then the residential parking behind that. And then back on building 1 and 2 site, you can see proposal for a location for the playground, the retaining that has to take place to hold up building 1, and the retaining walls that are going to take place in the plantings or on the periphery that we'd like to install to again make the grades work as they fall down. You can also see the material choices we've made with the Luna wood siding to tie in with the existing color and texture of Atkins, and you can see our all of our mechanical equipment up on the roof and the photovoltaic panels as the roof screen. You can also see how the pattern of every unit having a balcony starts to play through on the facade, and you can see the shadowing there, and you can see that a bit further here. Again, on this very tricky corner where we've got retaining walls, we've got a commercial space down at 280, we've got another commercial space up at 286.5. The third commercial space back here, and then you can see the balconies for each of the units that look out and give some shadowing to the elevation. And with that, I'd like to open it up to questions.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you.
So why don't you stop your screen share for a moment? All right, I see 2 hands from the board and staff. Nate, why don't we start with you and then we'll go to Johanna.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, Nate Malloy, a planner with the town. I was going to say that, this is a site plan review use, so it's a mixed use buildings allowed in the BVC zoning district. And, so there's 30% of the floor area is mixed use. It meets that. It's not all in one building. So the zoning bylaw is written to allow for that to happen on a project or a site, as long as each building has some mixed use component or non-residential component. It can satisfy the mixed use standard in the bylaw. So it's a site plan review use. The special permit is for the height. So the height and number of floors, height and number of feet, and then in the BVC, we set a minimum and maximum front setback. But given, as Kyle mentioned, the grading and the amount of street frontages, there, some of the front setbacks are actually exceeding what we would typically want in the business village center zoning district, but it seems, appropriate here given the site layout. So, this is different than, say, BVC and other village centers. And so there's a site plan review application and then a special permit application for the setbacks and the height. So, 4 floors to a building instead of 3. He's allowed, BVC allows up to 40 feet in height. And so, there's, the height exceeds that, highest being 49.8 or 5 or whatever that dimension is. And so some of the buildings are taller than, 40 feet, and then they have an additional floor. So that would need to be a special permit by the board. Different voting requirements, but all part of the same project. I don't have anything else right now. There's a few waivers possibly. The idea would be that, I don't expect this to be completed tonight and probably not in, 2 evenings. And so we would continue this and get, have more information from Kyle. It needs to go to the Conservation Commission. And, we would continue the conversation on this. So there'll be a development application report for the next hearing and more information. But tonight was really just to have the board understand the project, and really understand, are you comfortable with the special permit, right? In the site plan review, if you are really thinking, wow, special permit, I'm not sure, or let's hear the case out and we can make that decision at the end. That's something that we could, get a sense for tonight. Is the board comfortable with that special permit and those requests, or do you want to just continue? You can continue the conversation another night or two. But if, for instance, right now you're like, wow, I don't know, we could talk about that and understand why or why not. So that's something that needs to happen for this project to occur.
All right, thanks, Nate. And Kyle, I wanted to actually thank you for your intro. I feel like we could have invited you to just come and tell us about the state of housing in Massachusetts without you having a project sometime. And then the quality of the presentation you've made for the project is really great.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
I was just going to give a report from our site visit this morning.
Good thing to do. Go ahead.
Great. And Bruce and Fred can chime in if I missed anything. But the 3 of us met Chris Brestrup and Nate Malloy, as well as Kyle and his colleague Dylan, right at that intersection where the commercial space would be and where the, what is it called? A woofer? Woof? That terminology for the kind of
Wanoof, I think it is.
Say it again.
Wooner.
Wooner. That's it. It's my new favorite design concept. But we met right there, and Kyle explained just how widespread the soil contamination was, and that they had done 63 boreholes to assess, and that's what led to needing to strip off the 12 inches of soil to eliminate or prevent exposure to toxic contamination, historic toxic contamination. Yeah, Kyle explained the grade. He explained that this project has been 6 years in the making. Explained a little bit about, different processes and waivers that have been granted in that 6-year period. And, this proposal is kind of the result of those 6 years of work. Let's see. We didn't walk the whole site just because it's not really accessible for walking, and there's a lot of invasive species and prickers and briars and no real paths. But we walked part of the way up, and Kyle pointed out where the gas infrastructure is and where the power lines are, noted that all the trees along the West Street will have to come down because that's what's needed to eliminate the soil contamination. Yeah, and then he walked through, the essential plan as described tonight in the hearing. Yeah, mentioned that the land was owned by Amherst College, and under this proposal, they would sell that land.
Hampshire College.
Hampshire.
Hampshire College, sorry. And then we had a conversation around bus stops and which buses stop where, and the desire to kind of tie into Atkins. And the applicant explained how much they've been in contact with the different neighbors at the site. And yeah, there was a recommendation to consider doing a presentation at Applewood so that those residents are informed about the project. But I think, yeah, that's my site visit report. Anyone have
Right.
anything to add?
Looks like folks agree with that.
Great.
All right, so yeah, I don't expect us to get all the way through this tonight either. So I'm thinking maybe we try to finish up by about 8:30. Give ourselves another 45 minutes. It depends how many public comments we have. So, but before we're done, I'm hoping that each of us can give a kind of knee-jerk opinion about how we're feeling about the project and the waivers and that are being requested. And if all of us are adamantly opposed to approving those, that could kill the project right off the bat. And so I think it would be good for us to be able to give Kyle an indication of, is he on the right track, or are we just not on the same page? So, so if you have comments or questions tonight, I hope we can keep them brief, just so we can kind of run through everybody that wants to talk. And so why don't we start with board members who have things they already know they wanted to say, and then we'll go to public comment. I just do want to let the public know that if, right now I'm seeing 65 attendees. And if all of you want to talk, I think I'm going to probably reduce the allotted time for each person to something like 1.5 minutes. So prepare your elevator speech before you get on, so you can make good use of that. All right, board members, we'll start with Bruce.
Thanks, Doug. I agree. I mean, I think this is what a good project application looks like. I mean, a very good project application looks like, both in terms of the product that's presented, the way in which it was presented, and the obvious thoughtfulness that's gone into this over a long time. I think I understood this morning that so far 30 iterations of the design process have taken place. I mean, that's a lot. And 10 of the last 10 of those have engaged the immediate neighbors in some respects as well. So perhaps then not surprising that it looks well resolved. It's a difficult site. The way in which it slopes down, it's difficult also, as I understood from this morning, because Applewood's resolution of their drainage situation, which was done years ago and before we had the standards we have now, and water is shifting off of that site and has become the problem of this site. These days that wouldn't be allowed, but it's a fact accompli now, and so this project is dealing with not only the difficulties of its own site, but also the residual of some of the neighbors. It's not a poor me thing, it's just a fact, but it's a fact that has to be dealt with. The intricacies of the grading and the floor levels and so forth, where these buildings hit the road and the runoff and the traffic ways and so forth, is, I think, probably driving the request for building height modification, because in order to do what they're doing on this site, it's a challenge, and that's what's driving it. And so our height bylaw is generally imagining a standard, predictable kind of site, and this site isn't quite that. And I think that's driving the reason for the request. Kyle could speak to that perhaps at some point if he decides.
all right.
I'm not going to have too much more to say, because I really do want to get us to public hearing, but I have questions, not for now, but for later, about bicycle storage, about EV charging, about the roof screening, the PVs on the north side, if they would be PV even on the north side or not, and whether there's a caretaker living in or not, disposition of affordable units and so forth, things like that, where that I would like to get to. But I don't think we need to have those answered now yet, because this clearly is going to be continued. But
Yep.
From my point of view, small questions, which I'm sure there are answers to, or if there aren't, they can be figured out. Generally speaking, I think this is a very applaudable project initiative in the town.
Okay, thank you. Pam, I'm going to ask you to put the timer on board members as well. Not a timer that counts down, but a timer that just starts at 0 and lets us know how long they've gone on. If you have that.
I don't know if I have that kind.
All right, then why don't you set it for 3 minutes and we'll see how people can do.
Okay.
All right, go ahead, Jesse.
Thanks, Doug. And thanks, Kyle, for the presentation. Overall, I think it's a great looking project. I really appreciate a lot of details and the overall design. I had a couple of concerns that Bruce already mentioned. I won't reiterate those. I'll add a couple of points to the conversation. Your whole introduction was really about how we need more family housing, where to raise a child. That was the big conclusion. So I was trying to look at this project and think, what's going to convince a family to go live here, if that's really the goal. And so I'm wondering if there are ways to enhance that aspect. I do see, at least the slides you presented, had a playground and a play area. That's great, but it does seem like the more of those type of amenities that were geared toward families, if that's really the goal, to have families live here, that would be fantastic. It's sort of at odds with my other comment, which is about parking. I know we talked about, maybe the state saying you don't need parking, et cetera, or not as much. But if I did the math right, you have 262 bedrooms. And if each has on average, I don't know, 1.5 people, that's a lot of people. And there's 117 spots. So it's, it's already one spot, less than one spot per unit, but then it's even a quarter per person potentially living there, something in that range. And so I think that's fine in an area where you can really get closer to the our bigger town centers. I'm struggling to think about that at this location. I feel like the need for cars might be greater down there. But again, more parking, less outdoor space. So I'm kind of torn about that myself. Yeah, I'll just stop there. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Jesse. Pam, we can restart. Fred.
Yeah, I think that this is a really positive proposal, and I think in general the allowances that are requested are squarely within kind of the intent of the bylaw, and I don't have a major problem with them. I do want to pick up on something that Jesse said, because he's quite correct about trying to have a family friendly. We're going to have a considerable amount of affordable housing here, which will be pitched at families. And I would like to suggest that the folks here are aiming the building that's down on West Street, that commercial, as being a daycare center, which is a wonderful idea. And I'd like to take that concept and Jesse's thoughts and extend that a little bit. And that is that in the commercial areas on the first floor of the other buildings, I'd like to suggest that some careful thought be given to the tenancies there in terms of perhaps some kind of convenience stores or something, so that families can live there and not be dependent on motor vehicles. Atkins, for example, really does not have, they do not carry paper products. So there's plenty of food at Atkins, but if you need toilet paper, you're in a car going up to the South Amherst Business District, and that could very easily be addressed, with a convenience store in that part of it. And so I'd like to support that as well, since there is obviously some intention about commercial tenancies. So, but in terms of the general thoughts, I fully support this project.
All right. Thank you, Fred. I guess I don't see other hands. Let's see, Karen, we may want to hear from you. But I will say I'm generally in favor of this project. I think the waivers that are being requested seem quite plausible. Given your intro, I'm wondering, why didn't you ask us for 5 stories? And, I think given the grade drop on this site and the lack of context for the area, I would have that as a serious conversation if people wanted to go there. And I also had a number of questions. I do think there's, I want you to express to us that you are confident that you think there's enough parking on this site, since it's your money that's at risk if you can't rent units or commercial space. And some other sort of picky or detailed questions that we can get to later. So I'll stop there. And Johanna, you have your hand up. Why don't you go next?
Yeah, since we're kind of testing the water, I think this is a positive project, and don't think we should just slam the door on a site plan review or these special permit requests.
Okay. Karen, are you still with us?
Yes, yes, I agree. I think it's a positive development. I do think I concur with Jesse. I think everything you can do to try to encourage this as a family-friendly place would be good. When I look at the design close up, what the materials, it looks quite attractive. I have the picture in front of me from a site. It looks kind of like very blocky and off-putting a little bit for a family with the design. So I think this is needed. I would never put the slammer on it at this point. I encourage you to keep working on it, but really have families in mind, daycare centers, playgrounds, and the aesthetics. I like the fact that you have a balcony. That's wonderful. So, yep, I'm in favor.
Okay. All right. Thank you, board members, for your initial reactions. And at this point, I am going to ask for public comment. And we'll just see how many people want to line up. So members of the public, this is the time for you to give comment at this first hearing. There will be, no doubt, a second hearing at least. So if you think of something to say later, you'll have a chance. All right, right now I have 13 hands raised. Now I'm up to 14.
Mr. Marshall, can I
Yes,
ask a
ma'am.
question? Nate, is it possible for you to provide people access to speaking while I run the timer? It's kind of hard to go back and forth.
Yeah, no, I can do that.
You can give the people the permission and I'll do the timer. Okay,
Mhm.
perfect.
And we're just
Thank
going to
you.
allow them to talk and not bring them in as panelists. That'll make it go faster.
and I'm gonna sign out now, so
Okay, Karen.
I have to leave. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Karen.
Yeah, sorry.
54. Okay,
Okay, great. All right, so Nate, I will rely on you to bring people or allow them to talk. And so I see 15, 16 hands at the moment. Why don't we, Pam, start with 2 minutes as the duration for the comments? If you can set the timer for 2 minutes.
mhm.
Okay, so Nate, let's start with Ed Wingerbach.
All right. Ed, you can unmute yourself and you should be able to speak.
All right, welcome, Ed. If you can give us your name and your address.
Thank you. This is Ed Wingenbach. I'm at 15 Middle Street, and I'm the president of Hampshire College. And so part of why I'm speaking here is that we've been working now for, well, I've been working for almost 6 years on this project, and Hampshire's actually been working on the project like this for much longer. I'll make 3 brief points. The first is I want to emphasize the critical need for housing in this area. And this is not just a Hampshire issue, but all of the 5 colleges run into this problem. It is very difficult to hire and retain faculty and staff when there's limited or no housing in the area. I've, over the last several years, almost never been able to have somebody I hired come and live in Amherst, in part because there's nothing to buy, in part because of the price. Second important point, the original purpose of this land, the donor who provided this land to the college, was ultimately to create places where faculty, staff, employees of Hampshire might be able to live in close proximity and walk to work and have a really high quality of life. And this project will allow us to do that. There are lots of people who work at Hampshire, I think, who would be very interested in a project like this. And then the last point I'll make is that this is completing this project at something like the current plan is really essential to Hampshire's financial success. This is sort of the last step in completing Hampshire's recovery from the problems of 2019. And we planned for this sale in 2024. We expected it to close last year. We've been able to work around that gap in our revenue stream, but without the sale closing in the next year, in this coming year in 2025, it'll cause some substantial and immediate stress on the college's operations without the special permits. So we really want to encourage approval of the special permits and the project, which we're really excited.
Okay, I guess that music means your time is up. That's a new feature, Pam.
I didn't do a thing. I'm sorry. I
Okay,
can't take any credit.
all right. Well, thank you, Ed. I see you've muted yourself, and we'll go on to the next person. Ken Rosenthal. Hello, Ken. Quickly, your name, your address, and your less
Thank
than
you,
2-minute comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ken Rosenthal, 53 Sunset Avenue. 55 years ago, I lived in this neighborhood, and I walked across the street to my office at Hampshire College. So I echo Ed Wingenbach's concern that this be that kind of a project. And therefore, I want to say that the word that has not been uttered for over an hour is student and student residents. We've talked about multifamily. We're talking about Hampshire employees who will live and work there and other employees who might live in town. So there are 2 things that I think the planning board can do as a condition to a special permit, and I would be glad to work with Nate in helping him do that. One has to do with the marketing of this project. Kyle Wilson has said to me that he can't fail to permit students to live there, but we can certainly ask him to market this to the HR, the human resources offices at the university and the 2 colleges, to the town's human resources offices, to the Chamber of Commerce and other places where people who might be or seeking employment or becoming employees in town might be looking for a place to live. Also, the alumni offices of the college, because I know that Hampshire alumni have asked me how I, as a returning person who went to college here and has come to retire here, how I enjoy it here, and I tell them I do. So alumni ought to be encouraged to apply. And they should be discouraged of marketing directly to students. If the student applies, that's one thing, but that is something that they should not encourage. Second, I've looked at the lease that's been proposed, and it has two elements that I think are inappropriate. One is it appears to permit rental by bedroom rather than by apartment. If I'm wrong about that, I hope so, but if I'm right, that should be not permitted as part of the special permit. And also, the leases, according to Mr. Wilson, Kyle Wilson, will be limited to 1 year, and they should be able to be longer than that. I need about 15 more seconds, please. They should be able to be longer.
Sorry.
Keep talking, Ken.
I'm
Thank you.
sorry.
They should be
15
able to be
seconds.
longer than a year so that people can feel comfortable in living there when they're going to work longer than a year in Amherst. We want people who live in town and to work in town, to live in town, so they can register their cars in town, and the town receives the excise tax from those people. I will be
Okay.
glad to work with Nate in some of the language that could be included. Thank you very much, Mr. Marshall.
Thank you, Ken. All right, let's go on to Bob Loeb. Hello, Bob. Name
here.
and address in 2 minutes.
Sure. I'm Bob Loeb. I live at 8 Baldwin Lane at Upper Orchard 1. So I'm in a butter. Have not been reached out to by the developer at this point. But I have 3 very brief comments to share. One is what we've heard tonight is very impressive plan for the buildings and the site and so forth. But I don't recall hearing any word about the traffic impact in the area. With all the commercial and the apartments and so forth, my back of the envelope guess is that adds 1,000 trips a day, more or less. There's insufficient parking that's been raised already. And my third point is really between the developer and the town of Amherst is that Rambling Road and Bay Road are already poorly maintained. You've got potholes, they're not maintained. The town does not attend to it. So the role of the developer in the town has to be, if this project goes forward, is to address traffic and keep the roads maintained so that people are not ruining the cars they're parking there. So the project, as I say, looks great, but it is only within that perimeter of the land that we've had discussion tonight, not about the environment surrounding it. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob. All right, let's bring over Nancy Eddy. Hello, Nancy. Your name, your address, and then 2 minutes.
Thank you, Doug. Nancy Eddy, 204 Spencer Drive, Amherst. That's Applewood. As a former member of the planning board, I have to congratulate you all on a very well-run public hearing. I know how difficult that is. Just a couple of issues. In general, I'm very much in favor of the village center planning process and the availability to have housing and some limited commercial, I think is excellent and will be good for Applewood residents as well as for others in the area. I hope that you will pay careful attention to the issue of arsenic removal. I know that that was a major issue with the building of the Hitchcock Center, and I assume that Archipelago will be vigilant about taking care of that issue. I'm pleased with the availability of affordable housing with 2 and 3 bedroom apartments, as well as just the 1 bedroom apartments. I think in general, this is very well designed, and I appreciate the sidewalks that are provided for Applewood residents and others going on, I gather, along Bay Road as well as along, I can't remember now whether that's Lannon Way, but the sidewalks will be well used by Applewood residents. I'm a little concerned about the 4 stories. It seems a little high for this general area. But I know that you will look at that carefully, and I am very much in favor of providing additional housing, particularly affordable housing for people in Amherst. So, thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. All right, how about Claire's iPhone? Let's bring her over. Claire, your full name and your address, please, and 2 minutes.
Thank you. Claire Bertrand. I live at 610 Bay Road. I also work over on West Street and I manage mixed use property. I wanted to express support for the project. I feel confident that this area is well situated. I have 3 main points. Well situated to in the fact that it's got Atkins. I'm sorry, but I brag about where I live because Atkins is amazing and it is a beautiful area. And I really appreciate how the developer designed it to really complement Atkins. I thought that was wonderful. Quality housing is really needed. And I feel like this kind of quality housing, welcoming various families, individuals, will be really appreciated. I also, in my work, we have a mixed use building. And I think the request for reduced parking is reasonable. I have now for years seen the flow of people who come into work and park and the residences who get in their cars if they have one and they leave. And there's a very nice match that happens so that it just doesn't it's not needed to have one parking space for every single person that could ever use the building because that's not how a mixed use building operates. I think the location is beautiful. I think the design is beautiful, and I welcome in fact the question of even more density. I thought 5 stories would be reasonable because there is really no context here where it would look inappropriate. So thank you again for taking my comments.
Thank you, Claire. Okay, we'll move on to Maria Kopicki. Hello, Maria, your name, your address, and no more than 2 minutes.
Thank you, Maria Kopicki, 65 Country Corners, right around the corner from this. I'm very troubled by this. I think that the folks who are praising this really don't have an understanding of what it is to live here. We're talking about adding 262 people to a neighborhood that only has 350 people. You're nearly doubling the size. It is zoned village center because Atkins and these 2 parcels are zoned village center, but that's it. The only thing that's walking distance in this area is Atkins and the Eric Carle Museum. People are going to need to have cars to get anywhere. I would really welcome having members of the planning board come here and talk to members of this community to see what it's really like. This is going to be a traffic nightmare. It is going to be dangerous. It is already dangerous roads here. I wrote you a long letter. I hope you read it. You're also talking about having the meeting the 30% commercial, but that's if you combine 2 separate parcels and treat them as one, which is not allowed in the zoning bylaw. So there is not sufficient commercial. It is too big. I would love to have neighbors. I would love to have neighbors who work in town, who work at Hampshire College. That would be great, families, but that is not what this is. It is predominantly 600 and 800 square foot apartments, and it is too much. You should obey the zoning bylaws. You should not go above the number of stories, and you really have to bring this down. We want this to be developed. We encourage that, but this is not the right plan. Please, I cannot invite you enough to come and really understand what the impact of this development would be as planned and as asking for changes to the bylaw. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to Chris Conlon. Hello, Chris. Your name,
Yes.
your street address, and no more than 2 minutes.
Chris Conlon, 33 Autumn Lane. I'm just calling to see what the plans are for support from the fire and the police department if this buildings or the buildings go up. And also, where are the solar panels going? Did he not mention that there would be panels? Are they on the
Yes,
roof?
there'll
or are
be
they?
the screens, the vertical wall around on the roof enclosing the mechanical units.
Okay. And the fire and police support,
They will be consulted, and we will get written comments from them during this approval process.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jason Dornley.
Hello, Jason Dorney, 5 Hickory Lane. I want to state that I'm coming as a member of the public, not as a member of the Conservation Commission, to make comments on this project. I am in favor of it. I think it's a good project. However, I don't think it actually goes far enough. I did some rough back of the napkin calculations, and it looks like the building footprint takes up roughly 15% of the area that's built on. Parking is 20% and open space is 30%. I think the buildings should all be taller. I think that parking can be either reduced to make room for additional buildings, put on Lannon Lane and Gold Way, and that overall the site constraints. I understand that there are site constraints that may constrain how this is built, but I believe that zoning and I think zoning is probably the largest constraint. This is a great example of us shooting ourselves in the foot and getting in the way of producing housing. If most of the folks here if the goal is to have most of these folks work or study at Hampshire College, this is an incredibly walkable area for housing for that purpose. And with Atkins being right there, it's great access to groceries. Yes, it will be hard to get paper products potentially, but there are bus stops. There are people who will have automobiles, and I just think a lot more could have been done. And I would want to know that. I'm curious to know if Archipelago did not have the constrictions for parking, for open space and all of that, if they would have built additional buildings and how many more units they thought they would have been able to build.
Okay, thank you, Jason. It's good we're getting a good variety of opinion this evening. All right, Li Zhang, if I hope that was pronounced correctly. There you
Hello.
go. Hello.
This is actually Gustavo Oliveira. I'm
Okay.
a resident at 68 Country Corners. I connected, I guess my phone shows my wife's name. She's also connected with her own name. So I live very near this project on Country Corners Road, and I am very strongly opposed to it. If the idea is that this should be family friendly and that we have a so-called housing crisis and we need more units, this is extremely misleading because over 80% of the units proposed are very small, 600 square foot or 800 square foot apartments with a single bathroom. That is not sufficient space for families to live. We know, we have toddlers. We moved here. We struggled with this housing market when we were arriving. Also, the fact that the proposed lease allows for rental by room really shows that behind Kyle's beautiful presentation, the real plan is to provide dorms for UMass students who can take the bus up there. And this is not appropriate for the zoning in the neighborhood. If the goal were to provide faculty housing or student housing for Hampshire College, great. I'm glad the Hampshire College's president is here. There's plenty of land within the college, campus itself that could be built. And there should be then a requirement that this is only then made available to Hampshire College affiliates. Now, what we currently see, as Maria pointed out, is that this project would increase the population neighborhood by 75%. And, people need cars to go from here. There's no traffic study, but this will significantly increase traffic in Rambling, turning into Bay. It's already dangerous. It's only going to become worse. Parking. There needs to be parking. This is not like town center. This is not like, oh, dense building and people can walk. Atkins is not affordable. Food at Atkins is not affordable for families. Residents will be forced to park on Rambling, to use commercial parking. It is possible to build mixed-use buildings within the height and floor limits. There's no reason to ignore our zoning laws. If people think that the zoning laws are problematic, then the zoning laws should be changed, but not just provide, these ad hoc permits.
All right, thank you, Gustavo. Sherry Wilson. Hello, Sherry.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, give us your address and your comment.
Sherry Wilson, 4 McIntosh Drive, which is Upper Orchard 2. I'm impressed that this project has been improved greatly over the past year. The project last year, it was turned down by the zoning board, was not acceptable. This is a very attractive project. However, I don't see why it needs to be 4 or God save us 5 stories tall. This is a rural area. The Eric Carle Museum, for instance, is I think 1.5 stories. And even the Hampshire College campus doesn't have more than 2 4-story buildings, and you don't see those from the street. I'm concerned about the height and the number of stories. Most other rural South Amherst apartment complexes are only 2 or 3 stories tall. And it just seems out of scale. I think it's wonderful to have a childcare facility on site, but what if you can't get a childcare facility? And what then would the commercial, so-called commercial entities be? And I agree that a convenience store idea would be very helpful. We don't have any place to buy paper and Scotch tape and things like that. I just wish that it was not so tall, and I wish I'm glad there are more larger apartments than were proposed before.
Great, thank you, Sherry.
I'm not sure you would want to live there as a family because it's just not that attractive for family.
Sherry, your time is up.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move on to Chris Hoke, I guess it is. Hello, Chris.
My name is Chris Hoke. I live at 2 McIntosh Drive, which is also very nearby. I want to agree with Maria Kapicki and Gustavo and Sherry about the height of the building. I find it very disconcerting that just over a year ago, when the project was turned down by the zoning board, one of the reasons was the height of the building and the exceptions that they were asking for, as well as the whole groundwater situation and the unevenness of the site. Nothing has changed in the past year. And if the town has these bylaws that say 4 stories, 40 feet, that's the height, that they should stick to that. And this project is just coming back asking for the same exceptions. They've gussied it up a little bit. But I agree with the fact that this is really not an area for families with small children. The traffic has been mentioned. I would invite anybody who really is interested in this to come stand along Bay Road in the evening between 4:30 and 5:30. The traffic from heading east on Bay Road from the double road roundabout there backs up to Rambling Road. And with all of the cars that are added at Rambling Road, it's really going to be a nightmare. And I think it's an incomplete project because there's nothing that has been proposed here or even studied about the traffic. So I think the height of the building and the traffic is going to be a big problem here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. We'll move on to Janet Keller. Hello, Janet. Hello, Janet. Can you unmute yourself?
Hi.
Hello, Janet.
Keller, Pulpit Hill Road, North Amherst. Much to like, and I hope that you will consider the reasonable comments of the neighbors and scale us back a little bit, add more amenities for families, make sure there's enough parking, get the drainage right. That's critical. It's too late after the fact. And I'm struck by the fact that there's a big roundabout out very close to this project, and that's for moving cars. So it needs to be considered when you're talking about the kind of people that can live there and live near there. And those are my thoughts at this point. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Janet. All right, let's go to Lorna Hunt.
Hello.
Hello, Lorna.
Hi, Mr. Marshall.
Give us your
My name,
address and your
yeah,
comments.
there you go. My name is Lorna Hunt, and I'm actually at 73 Barrett Street in Northampton, and somebody who's been trying to move into Amherst for quite a while. Is it okay to be a resident of Northampton and speak here?
Sure.
Great, thank you so much. So I moved to this area about a year ago to be the Chief Information Officer at Hampshire College, and really struggled and failed to find housing in Amherst, and I'm still looking. I've also recruited a number of people who have had to turn positions down because of the housing situation in the area. So I really want to encourage this excellent project to move forward. I also want to make a pitch for those of us that are single or couples, either earlier in our career or like myself, mature professional, who will be using those 1 and 2 bedroom spaces and using them well. I would love to be able to walk across the street to Hampshire College, stroll to Atkins to buy my dinner. It would be really a lovely place to live. And I do encourage and support any measures and addressing the permits that will facilitate the success of this project. Thanks for the time.
All right, thank you, Lorna, and good luck.
Thank you.
All right, now Kevin Kennedy. Hello, Kevin.
Hi. Yeah, hi, Kevin Kennedy. I live outside of Amherst, but I've worked for 17 years at 97 Spring Street in Amherst for the Five College Consortium. I think that the main point I want to make is to echo everything that Lorna Hunt just said. I meet with lots of administrators and faculty members from all 5 campuses, and something that I hear consistently is the difficulty in both keeping and attracting employees because of the difficulty in finding housing. both in the town of Amherst and in the whole Five College area. I think this is an excellent project. I think the location is excellent because of its proximity to Hampshire College and Atkins and public transportation options. And I think having retail space at the project itself will be an added bonus to the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. And now we'll hear perhaps from Li Zhang. Hello.
Thank you
Li.
so much. So I just want to echo back to Maria and Gustavo and a few other friends and neighbors' point. I do think it's really crucial to listen to residents who live here. So I'm Gustavo Oliveira's wife. My address is 68 Country Corners. I moved to this region, this specific neighborhood, about 3 years ago. So I do concern about the safety of my child. And also the senior folks who oftentimes walk in the neighborhood. I do think the parking and also the traffic flow and also the demographic change with this kind of new planning. I'm not opposed with this idea of develop affordable housing, especially to Hampshire College colleagues. But I'm really concerned about who actually would end up with renting these places and who will live here and who are going to be in charge of this whole neighborhood transformation. Because in the end, who actually choose to stay here before this development has to have a say in this entire planning. Otherwise, it's just a planning on the paper. It's just a planning for the future, not for people who live here, who already invest their life, their work, their community, their neighborhood in this place. So please do hear from residents who currently live in this area, in this specific neighborhood and surrounding neighborhood. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. We'll go to Adele Gilbert. Welcome, Adele. Your name, your address, and your comment.
My name is Adele Gladstone Gilbert. I live at 38 Autumn Lane, which is in Hampshire Village. One thing I wanted to question about was we have a swimming pool, which is located very close to the development that's proposed that would be facing West Street. I didn't see the pool indicated on anything, and I'm wondering how close that would be to the parking for that building. So that's a question I have. Our swimming pool is currently basically in the woods and is very quiet and very nice. So I'm concerned about what effect that will have, that development will have. This is a very quiet neighborhood. And I have a couple of design degrees, one from Cornell. And I've always paid a lot of attention to architecture and design. This isn't what I would picture at this site. I would picture, I would welcome more shops, since Atkins is the only thing going there. And I've always pictured something like more condominiums, more townhouses. What's being proposed is unlike anything else. There are no other 4-story flat roof buildings in the area other than buildings that are on the college campus. So I have a lot of questions about this, and I hope you'll listen to people who live in this neighborhood, we all have a lot of questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Adele. We have 3 more folks, hands raised. Kai-Ping Yao.
Hello.
I'm the resident living in 88 Bumbling Road.
Welcome.
I just yesterday started to realize there's a project going on. And then when I listened to the presentation today, the beginning, the first impression is the vibe of South Amherst. It is really different from what is presented here. This area is very quiet, and then putting immediately like a 75% population like in this area, like more, definitely gonna change the vibe here. And also the traffic, definitely many people already mentioned. The roundabout nowadays is already kind of like how to say, sometimes clogged, and we need to wait for like people to go around the roundabout is already delayed. So I cannot imagine like double the people, even more than double what's gonna be for the roundabout area. And also for I think many people from Hampshire College faculties, they mentioned they want to have their recruit potential faculty to live nearby. But it seems like the design of this apartment area does not really target to those people, professionals, who gonna live here for a long time and like have their kids raised. And really, this is more, I think, too dense for the faculty members to live. The target is quite deviate from what is designed now. Apparently the 4th floor is more than maximum power. It's not a beginning. It's my concern.
Okay, thank you very much, Kai Ping. And Debbie Jacques. This is the last of our commenters. Debbie, welcome. If you could give us your name.
Okay, I had to. Yes, Debbie Jacques and my husband and I are both here. We both wanted to say a little bit, but 1260 West Street. So we actually live up the street from the 3rd building. And, you know, at first I thought, what a wonderful project. We need more housing. Everybody knows that. My concern, and I'll try to bullet them as quickly as I can, is I really feel as though it's too big of a project for the area that it's in. First of all, 4 stories maybe doesn't seem a lot to some people, but it's pretty high for us people who have just a few houses in this area. So I would love to see a project, but I really worry about the scale of it because, as many of the people said, you know, I'd love to have a place for some people to live, but it's like you're squishing everybody into this one small place. And the thing I want to speak about personally is the traffic. We have lived in this house for 27 years, and both my husband and I grew up in Amherst, and it's changed over the years, but 27 years. Now, as of today, we cannot cross the road to walk and take our walks. We actually drive down to Atkins to park, or we drive over to Hampshire College and walk. And by the way, my son did go to Hampshire College, so I love the college. But it's just, we can't even cross the street anymore because the cars coming down the road are too fast, and you get to the roundabout and you do have to wait. So I'm very concerned about that. The other thing is there was an accident in front of our house about three years ago, and it took the police 15 minutes to get down here to help the person. So I'm very concerned about doubling the amount of people in this area and having them service everybody equitably. So those are my thoughts. And
okay, thank you, Debbie.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thanks for running the clock, Pam, and thanks for bringing folks over, Nate. Nate, one question that was prompted by one comment I wanted to ask you. This project did come to the ZBA a year or a year and a half ago. what has caused it to come to planning board as opposed to ZBA this time?
Sure. So it went to the zoning board for a variance, which, you know, didn't happen, right? So
And that was
given the zoning,
a use variance?
it was as far as I know, it was just the use variance that they, you know, given the site constraints, topography. So you can get a variance from the zoning board in Massachusetts for shape of lot, soil, and topography. And given all the elevations, it was, you know, the developer was finding it difficult to get the 30% for the buildings and have it be accessible. And so there was a variance to have reduced. In our bylaw, we don't allow that, you know, that to be waived. And so it was a variance to have a reduced mixed use component. And so that wasn't granted. And so, you know, through further refinement and working the site, they're able to have a design where they can accommodate that. And so, you know, it doesn't need a variance. It really is a site plan review. And so, you know, the bylaw allows the additional height through footnote A in a special permit. It's not illegal or violating the bylaw. It happens, you know, throughout the bylaw. We have many areas where there's footnotes and waivers and there's allowances for this. So I don't consider this to be, you know, a violation. It's a discretionary permit that the permit granting authority, you know, can or doesn't have to grant. And so, you know, it happens quite frequently. And so really, if this were, say, 3 stories and under 40 feet or under, it would be site plan review, and there really would be limited ability to deny it. So even you could deny the special permit and still allow the site plan review use to happen as a smaller building. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, there's a few different ways to approach it, but, you know, it doesn't need a variance. It just needs a, you know, special permit and site plan review.
Right. No, I just, you know, it's interesting that it was rejected by ZBA and then it's come to us. So, okay. All right. So the time now is 8:34, and we've gotten a good taste of the kinds of comments the public have, and I think we've gotten at least initial reactions from all the board members. Kyle, I assume you have more work to do. For one thing, I suspect you do need to have a traffic study. And we've clearly heard that there are traffic issues in that area. That was a surprise to me, at least. So would everybody be in support of continuing the hearing at this point? And we should find a date certain to do that, Pam, if you can think about that for a minute. Let's hear from Bruce.
Because we are about to continue, I guess, and I thought I would make my one concern, or a concern, that it would probably be good to put forward sooner rather than later. I think that the proposition of using that building number 3, I think, as a daycare center is a noble aspiration, but in looking at the parking and so forth, it's a go in, back around, and drive out through the same portal arrangement, which is quite common and reasonable, I think, with a lot of parking uses. But I wondered whether that would be considered dangerous for a daycare center. And so it's a question, really, because if we did want to have a daycare center there and we really want to make it possible, my concern is that a daycare operator, or I can think of my daughters, for example, picking up their kids, would feel, I think, that that was a bit of a risky place to be dropping off kids and picking them up. I know they'd be, you know, you'd park, you'd take your kids over by hand and so forth, but it just seems tight, particularly with the requirement to turn around in the way that you would have to turn around there. So the question, Kyle, is, have you talked, and you don't have to answer it now, but have you talked to prospective daycare operators, and am I right? Would they balk at the prospect, and would they balk so much at that prospect that they might decide not to take up what otherwise might be a very attractive location? And if the answer to those is yes in any way, is there anything you can do to make it more agreeable and perhaps safer for pick up and drop off of daycare?
Thank you, Bruce. We've got Fred and then Jesse. Fred?
Yeah, I just looked at the lease, and I agree that the business about renting bedrooms is a non-starter, absolute non-starter. This is the first lease I've seen. We get these leases. We got the one at on let's see, on the West Street in the center of town, the Hastings building. Yeah, those leases do not have this at all. This is the first time I've seen this, and that's a serious problem. I'm all for the project basically, but that yeah, that's an issue.
Okay, thank you, Fred. Jesse?
Thanks. My comment taps into what Fred just brought up, along with several of the comments we heard. I was thinking this earlier, and I was going to hold off on bringing this to our attention, but I'd like us all to consider. You know, we've heard how it's not affordable for staff, faculty to move into town, and I think that's true. But if these units are rented at market rate, which we all know is driven by the student rental, staff and faculty won't be able to afford them either. And that's the real issue. So I just want to be real clear. My view on this is it's not going to be populated by staff and faculty and families, maybe a few, but predominantly it will be students, is my best guess. Kyle, if you have a way that you think that's not true, I would love to hear about that. But again, I just want to put that in all of our minds moving forward.
All right. Thank you, Jesse. Kyle, anything?
Yep. First, I'd like to say we will have a traffic study that should be in any day. So we've engaged an engineer to do that. So we'll present that to you. And also we will ensure that the lease is by the apartment, not the bed. I think that's a hangover from our 47 Olympia project. So we'll confirm that.
Okay. I guess I will make one comment about the childcare aspiration. I believe there are some pretty specific guidelines for the proximity of outdoor space to childcare classrooms. And so I would advise you to make sure you've looked at those state guidelines for childcare centers when you are laying out the site, if you haven't already. The other thing is the childcare centers, in my experience, are not really high revenue operations, and you probably can't charge market rates for Class A new buildings and get a childcare center. But maybe, you know, that's just a comment. Johanna.
Thank you. Kyle, I definitely don't want to send you on a wild goose chase of doing more work, but there was enough interest in the idea of bringing the height up that I wondered if you couldn't just like come back with some additional numbers on if you went to 5 stories, how many more units would that add? And how does it change the economics for you? Because my understanding is you basically need, if you're going to redevelop this toxic site, you need 4 stories for the numbers to break even. What does that look like with 5 stories, and how might that change some of your thinking? So again, don't want to send you on a wild goose chase if you're like, oh, we're not interested, but I'd be interested in having that conversation. My second point is going back to our conversation on the site visit about water management on site and how the parking requirements really lead to a lot of impervious surface that then creates runoff that makes the water management more challenging. So, you know, in public comment, I definitely heard people mention parking as a problem. I think if you think you can rent the units, you know, it's on 2 bus lines. One goes to UMass, one goes to Mount Holyoke. There's a supermarket right there. There's childcare on site. Like, I could imagine a set of tenants moving there with the aspiration of being car free, or using their car very little. And so I guess I'd just be interested in, like, is there more you could do, or like around water management if the parking requirement was a little bit, yeah, less stringent, I guess.
All right, thanks, Johanna. One thing you prompted me to wonder when you were talking about that was, you know, if we allowed a higher building, could there be parking under the building or on the first floor or of one of the buildings, or, you know, if there was enough commercial space in the other buildings? I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure that's something we'd want to see urbanistically, but just came to mind. Okay, time is 8:43. Pam, do you have a suggestion for when we would continue?
Well, I guess I would wonder, you know, what the time frame is. I mean,
Okay.
when is Kyle going to be ready to come back? I mean, April 16th, he could come back.
Well, Kyle, do you have a date with the Conservation Commission yet?
We do not. I think it may be the 9th. If not, it's the 23rd of April.
So should we put you on the agenda for the first meeting in May?
I would prefer the first available meeting in April. I think we'll have our traffic study by then. I think we can have some additional information on the common space between buildings 1 and 2, and could answer some of the questions that were brought up. So I'd prefer to be on the April meeting if we could.
Pam, what does our agenda look like for the first in April?
The first one in April, that would be April 2nd. And in my opinion, we do have one site plan review scheduled for 6:35. But I think you could probably also do Kyle too, but I would also ask Nate, because he might be aware of other things that I'm not aware of yet.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I would recommend the 16th. It would give staff time to, you know, write a development application report, reach out to police and fire, town engineer, make sure we have comments, and, you know, that way we can have more of a discussion. I feel like if we were on the 2nd, we'd continue it again, and, you know, we might as well dedicate more time at one meeting to cover more topics as opposed to spending a little bit of time over, you know, 4 meetings. I think we could, you know, put more of our meeting on the 16th to this project.
That sounds
Okay.
fine.
And Pam, when would we put it on for 6:35 or?
No, we already have something scheduled for 6:35, so I would say
6:45.
6:45.
The other one on the 16th, though, that's the preliminary subdivision. Is that what it is?
Yes.
Yeah, that won't take very long.
No,
Well, should we make it 6:40?
we can say 6:40.
Make it 5 minutes rather than 10?
Yeah, we can do that.
All right.
Okay.
All right, so we're sort of collecting the information for a motion to continue, and it looks like April 16th at 6:40 p.m. Bruce, what do you want to talk to us about?
Well, before I make that motion, I do notice that we've had the report from the fire department. Oh, yes, we have. I think it's on this project. Yes, it's not on the review drive, and it's taken its historic form of all these things you need to do rather than whether you've done them. I think we could perhaps ask Kyle to review that and to perhaps assure us that all of those will be taken care of so that we can have that. Otherwise, we go back to the fire department and have them review the plans, which I think is probably the less attractive way of doing it. So, Carl, if you would look at that report and assure us that everything is okay, and if there is anything there that is not, would you be able to tell us on the at the next meeting? And with
Will
that,
do.
I would move continuation to the date agreed, time and date agreed.
All
I mean,
right,
not agreed, but stated earlier. Yeah.
all right. Hannah, you there to second?
I am. Second the motion.
Okay. Before I ask for the vote to continue, you know, we heard a lot of comments tonight about too much height. And I think I've heard some sentiment from this board about perhaps more height. So obviously, if we decide we want to reduce the height for Kyle, that's probably going to kill the project, as I would guess, because it certainly is an expensive site to develop. So I'm hoping. I guess I wanted to just say, is anybody inclined to want to reduce the height right now? I mean, before Kyle spends another month working on the project. I see two heads shaking no. I haven't, I'm not inclined. I mean, you know, we have these village centers in this master plan, and I thought that the intent was this is where we would build things that were denser. And, you know, if we're not going to do that in these village centers, you know, we've gotten pushback at North Village Center at one point, and you know, we certainly have a continuing conversation downtown. But you know, if this is a village center, why wouldn't we build it up a little bit? And if it's too small, that's another conversation. Should it be bigger? But that's where I stand. Jesse?
Yeah, I'm not inclined to reduce it, but I'm also not so inclined to encourage it to be taller. So
okay. All right, great. So Nate?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I mean, I know there, Johanna, you mentioned that. I wouldn't necessarily want the applicant to go through, you know, architectural plans and show, you know, if the floor plans repeat, we have an idea of what it could look like. I mean, maybe it's just a simple sketch. I'm not, you know, I agree. I don't think it's worth the time and money and effort to really explore 5 floors. You know, I mean, if anything, you know, have a longitudinal section from Applewood down and, you know, look at what is the context of the site in terms of height. You know, there's questions about roof lines and other things. So, you know, what does that mean for the building now? And I don't necessarily think exploring a 5th floor is what I would recommend. I think, you know, looking at what's there now and describing it better and looking at other examples is where I would put my energy.
Okay.
You know, I agree, Doug, it's a village center, but it's also, you know, to me, 5 floors is pretty tall. And so I don't, you know, if it came in at 5 floors in staff's development application report, I might say, well, you know, what's precedent for that? And is there ability to step heights or reduce heights for some parts of it and have some be 5 or, you know, something. So I wouldn't recommend 5 across the board here necessarily.
Yep. Kyle, I guess one other thing I guess I should just mention, and we haven't talked much about materials, and we often do talk about materials. I have a little bit of concern about exposed glulam columns, you know, and how they wear over time. I don't know much about the Luna wood and how durable it is and whether it turns gray or black or, you know, after 20 years, is it going to be just an eyesore? Sort of internal porch or balconies on your building with a wood structure feels like an invitation for leaks onto the cross-laminated timber floor panels. You know, I understand the sort of brown theme that's similar to what Atkins is now. But these are very different buildings than that. So I guess I'm just, I looked at your rendering and I noticed that the Applewood complex is a pretty light colored complex, I guess I'll say. And I just wasn't sure, it's probably pretty easy in the rendering to switch the color to a light color and just see what it looks like, rather than only try one option. All right, I don't see any more hands raised, so we'll go ahead and vote on the continuation that Bruce made the motion, Johanna seconded motion to continue to April 16th at 6:40. Bruce, we'll start with you.
Aye.
All right, Fred
Aye.
and Jesse,
Aye.
Johanna.
Aye.
All right, we've lost Karin, and I'm an aye as well. That's 5 in favor, and 2 absent. Okay, the motion carries. Kyle, we'll see you in April. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
All right. All right, time now is 8:54. Why don't we take a 5-minute break? We'll come back at 9 o'clock.
Doug, I want to applaud you on reading all 65 names.
A lot of
Think-
names.
I think that deserves a mention in the local newspaper.
Uh-huh.
Nate, why don't you tell Paul Bockelman that Doug read 64 names and that other committee chairs could at least read half a dozen, because it's regrettable, and I think small as shameful that other committees don't do what he does. It's a public meeting after all.
I will. I'll put a press release out for Doug.
I just want to clarify, it was
Please,
52
no,
names.
no.
It was a nice, no, it's nice that you do that, Doug. I feel like early in Zoom, there had been some complaints about that, and I thought there was going to be an update or a new version that could allow, staff could manage it, but the attendees could then see the names, but it's not, I don't think it's been forthcoming. So.
All right, it looks like we're all back. So time is 9:02. We can move on. Next item on the agenda, ZBA, a presentation regarding a ZBA special permit request to reconstruct a two-family dwelling, non-owner occupied duplex that was destroyed by fire for property located at 72 Curtis Place. map 18D parcel 5 in the RN Neighborhood Residence Zoning District. This is ZBA application FY 2025-18 with Lawrence Hanson for 72 Curtis. So is Mr. Hanson present? Looks like he is. Thanks for bringing him over, Pam. Welcome, Larry. You can unmute, maybe turn on your video. Thank you. So maybe you could give us the context for the rebuild of this property.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Larry Hanson, owner of 72 Curtis Place. It's a duplex, and about a little over a year ago now, experienced a fire, pretty significant, and enough where it makes more sense to demolish it and rebuild something brand new, something newer, safer, that conforms with other houses in the neighborhood. So I had already met with the historical commission, had them on site to take a look, and yeah, we're proposing to build a new duplex.
And you need the ZBA approval for what reason?
It's already under a special permit. The fact that it exists already, I suppose.
Maybe Nate knows.
Right. So as a non-conforming, it was non-conforming, they could have rebuilt in substantially the same footprint, but if it's a whole new building or footprint, then it needs a special permit.
I see.
You'll notice that there's another individual that has their hand raised. It's Mike Bowen.
Mike Bowen.
Yeah, he's part of the survey team from Levesque Associates. Yeah, so the house we're proposing to rebuild, the footprint is the same size. We're just going to be turning it so it faces a better direction. It makes more sense. It'll face the road better.
So it looks like it faces Curtis Place and that the back faces Belchertown Road. Is that right?
Yeah, it's kind of, the current house is like a little twisted the way yeah, because I think when it was first built, it was the house that before all the other houses. And I think the original occupants of it would enter from Belchertown Road. But once the Curtis Place subdivision was built, they would enter from the other direction. So the house is twisted as
okay. So there is no vehicular access off Belchertown Road now.
Yep.
Okay. One other question I had, it seemed like when I looked at the first floor plan, the two adjacent units were what I'd call mirrored.
True.
But when I go to the second floor plan, they're not mirrored. They are identical. In other words, the unit on the left has the bedroom in the corner, which, and I would expect the bedroom on the right to be in the corner. So it was also mirrored, but the way it's drawn, the dimensions imply that the stairwells don't line up on the right-hand unit.
Yeah, it's just the way we designed it. We try to create some symmetry the way it looks on the outside. But you're right. So the first floor is more mirrored and the second is like flipped.
Well, then I guess if I look at the unit on the left, on the first floor, the distance from the end to the stair is 13 feet. And if I look at the second floor, the distance from the end to the stair is 14 feet. So it's not critical for our conversation tonight, but I don't think your plans are completely coordinated between the two floors.
Okay, I can certainly take a peek at it. Maybe there's a typo somewhere in there.
Okay. All right. So I guess, Nate, the idea is that we give a few comments, then you're going to put together a memo and just give an overview of the different kinds of comments that the board made and share those with ZBA.
Yeah, so I think I had emailed the applicants and their representatives saying that the planning board wanted to look at this, you know, and it would provide a memo to the zoning board, which I think is happening next week. And the idea is that the planning board can provide, you know, often if there's a project they're interested in or they would want to provide some additional comments, they can. So this is one. You know, the ZBA, it's a discretionary permit. It also would be a non-owner occupied duplex, which is requires a special permit. So, you know, the zoning board can apply the design review principles. You know, they have their 10.38 findings, which was included in the packet for tonight. So if the, you know, planning board has general questions about the site design or aesthetics or use, then, you know, this would be the time. And then, you know, if there's any items of consensus or if we want to take a vote on certain recommendations to the zoning board, we could.
Okay. All right. Does anyone, I presume that was discussed at the last meeting, which I missed, and we all thought, everybody thought we wanted to look at this. Now that we've all seen it, board members, are there any comments on this proposal? I presume we did not have a site visit for this. I'm actually unfamiliar with this part of town. Is the Belchertown Road landscape somewhat shielded? Like, you know, it's not very far from the back of the house to the road. Is it likely to be loud for the occupants, or would it be better to try to move the building a little farther away from the high-speed road?
It's pretty well shielded with a tree line now. And the house isn't, from the current house to the proposed house, it's the same distance from the road.
Mm-hmm. Well, but this is an opportunity to improve things. Okay, so right now the front of the house with the sort of primary entrances faces Curtis Place, and you park between the Curtis Place and the house. So the cars are always sort of in the front. I can imagine it might be worth trying a site plan that had the driveway around to the back and that the houses were in the back, so you could come in the rear and go right into the kitchen with your groceries. Bruce?
Can we bring the plan up? I don't get a packet, and sometimes it's I could probably go and
Sure.
find it, but it's not easy to me. It's just I vaguely remember this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sort of a triangular lot, and you enter at the apex. And I see you've got a stormwater garden on the south side. Is that a new feature that's compliant with our conservation guidelines, or what's the order of that?
I can speak to that. So we reached out to the town engineer, and they suggested, because there was a slight increase in impervious area, that we do some sort of stormwater management. So he suggested a rain garden. So that rain garden is sized for the difference in the impervious area on site.
Okay, great, thank you. Is this a neighborhood of owner-occupied houses, or is it all rental?
I believe there's a couple owner occupied, but for the majority, as far as I know, is rental.
Uh-huh. Okay. Bruce, you still have your hand up. Are you expecting to say something?
No, I th I think I was supportive of having it come. I thought I could make some suggestions that would perhaps refine it a little bit. I find that the suggestions or the thoughts that I had are probably not those that can be appropriately levied onto. It's a very simple and imaginative building. Always like the things be a little more imaginative and so forth, but I don't know that I don't know how to condition imagination.
Yeah, I guess, you know, I had the initial comment about the mirror image versus sort of the not mirrored. I think it would actually be better if the second floor was mirrored so that the bedrooms were, both bedrooms were in the corner. That would give you an opportunity to put a second window in the end of the end facade into the bedroom. You know, it wouldn't need to be in the middle of the wall, but it would be kind of right opposite the door that you walk in, and that would give the bedrooms a little more light. That's one thought. Let's see.
Okay.
I agree.
And you know, it would liven up the end facade a little bit, which is at the moment there aren't any windows on the second floor, which is kind of drab, I guess I'd say.
Yes, there's a time-honored standard for space vitality in interior spaces, and it's light on two sides. And putting windows, if you put windows on adjacent walls, the light from one window illuminates the backside of the window interior opposite or adjacent to it, and it reduces glare and just makes everything feel better.
Yeah.
So
you don't feel like you're in a row house.
that's right. There's there's opportunities that are again. I mean, I would just suggest that if you wanted to make a more appealing space for people to spend time in, doing what Doug suggests would certainly elevate that, and putting windows in bedrooms on two sides where possible, and it would be possible out of 4 out of 6 of them. I would say don't dismiss the opportunity of doing that. It's so much more delightful, so much more pleasant a space to be in. That's just from the interior point of view. The windows also make the exterior look a little more interesting. I mean, not having windows on the upper level of that gable end seems to be a peculiar.
Yeah. But that was sort of the main comment that I had. I mean, it's not really very nice to have the parking in the front yard, but given the site, you know, I don't know. And you don't want to add more impervious by having to drive around to the back, and we've obviously spent the time to get the plan put together. So at this point, I don't think there's anything to be done with that. But you know, the layout of the second floor was probably the main comment I had. All right, board members, any other comments? Bruce and I have kind of given our 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, you know, personally, from a staff standpoint, I'm going to echo Doug that, you know, having this wide driveway and parking in front with 2 pole lights, and then the trash in front makes this look like a commercial site and not a residential site. And so, you know, that's something that the ZBA will look at. Probably, you know, I don't see any screening proposed or any plantings, and so, you know, when this goes to the zoning board, you know, the questions they might ask, you know, are both about the interior, the use of the property, of the building as well as the site layout. And so, you know, to me right now, this doesn't look like it was, you know, a single family residential home from the neighborhood when this was this was developed in mid to late 20th century, and they're smaller homes mostly with as Doug mentioned, say a garage and cars, and the way the site is laid out is a lot different than this. And so if there's any ways to have a narrower driveway or to change the parking layout or have it screened with plantings, I think it would benefit a lot. Just having a fence here with the trash behind it seems peculiar, that there's you couldn't swing it around to the side or something, but instead the first thing you look at straight through the parking lot is the trash area.
There's quite a bit of existing screening on the sides. That's why we didn't add more.
Well, I assume you're going to be disturbing a fair amount of the site with the construction.
Some of the screening that's there, we wouldn't be, the
Okay.
size we wouldn't be touching, no.
All right, well, I guess I don't have a drawing of the existing site, so I can't comment on that. Bruce, you've got your hand up again?
Yes, I noticed that the driveway is 20 feet wide, and that does seem to be unnecessarily wide. I mean, it's expensive to do that. It's also expensive in terms of the impact on stormwater. Our community has, where I live in North Amherst, there are 11 houses served by a common driveway, and that common driveway is 16 feet wide. And that's wider than we originally intended it be. So I think that a 12-foot driveway would be perfectly adequate for that. So I don't know whether you have a reason for having it wider, but if you took 8 feet off that, you would save some money and save some impact on the stormwater system that you have to put in.
I think there were some minimums we had to adhere to. That's why it had to be 20.
Was that
Really?
the fire? Was that the fire department?
It may have been. Do you remember, Mike?
I can double check. It may have been the fire department, but off the top of my head, I don't remember the exact reason for that.
Yeah.
It's peculiar. I can't imagine that that there would be a requirement. I don't know where it would be, but anyway, make sure that you're if you don't want to do it and there's a mistaken impression that someone else does, then we really should test that out. Or I would suggest that ask the zoning board whether that is a typical requirement they have on duplexes. I would be very much surprised if that's the case.
Yeah, this is a small enough house that I don't know that the fire department's 20-foot rule would really apply here.
I mean,
I know they have that rule for just for a fire lane to access large buildings, but
Plum Trees Road in North Amherst is narrower than that.
yeah. Let's see. I guess I would also ask, I assume this is a rental unit and you expect to have 4 people in each unit. That's why there's 8 spaces, because almost, if we were able to reduce the number of parking spaces, that would be sort of lessen the impact of them.
That is correct. It was already a 7-bedroom before. Yes, that's the goal, for it to be a 4 and a 4.
A 4 and a 4. Okay. You could almost run the 8 spaces all in one side or the other, and I wonder if that would make it a little less intrusive, I guess. Just put them all on one side of the driveway. All right, well, I don't want to prolong this any more than we have to. It's already 9:23. So board members, I don't see any other comments, any other hands raised. Nate, you've gotten some comments from us. I think as long as you can put those down and transmit them. Oh, Fred, I see your hand. I'm sorry.
Yeah, on the driveway width, as you know, I live in a 3-family house with a lot of bedrooms, and I've been to any number of special permit proceedings over 50 years that I've owned the property, and never ever has anyone suggested that the driveway wasn't wide enough. And I'm guessing it's 12 feet, if it's even that much. So that's just another opinion that I don't think that 20 foot is an actual requirement.
All right. Thank you, Fred. All right. Nate, I think those are the comments that the board has. I think, you know, as Bruce said, it's a pretty basic structure. And we'll be interested to hear what the zoning board thinks. Larry and Mike, thank you for your time. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, time is 9:25. Next item, general housing discussion. Status update regarding the accessory dwelling unit bylaw. Nate, anything you want to say about that at the moment?
There was the model zoning bylaw that was presented by the state recently. It's online. There was a webinar. It's in the packet online, as well as an updated document from staff. I think you know, a few communities are starting to go ahead and try to vote on an updated bylaw. I think we still need to look at ours. You know, and my impression is the state really wants to have ADUs be by a building permit and not be overly regulated and restricted. I've asked KP Law to look at the document that's in the packet to determine if things are reasonable or unreasonable, you know, or possibly prohibited. I think there's a few things highlighted in yellow that are probably, you know, I would not recommend. I had them in there just because it's new ideas, things that were discussed. And I will say that the student home definition is something that we've talked about, and I don't really, you know, the building commissioner and staff is not sure how that could be enforced. And even if there was a complaint, you know, we can't ask for this, you know, the status if it's a student. KP Law originally thought it could be a prohibited regulation, and if not, unreasonable. And the webinar suggests that as well. You know, we have some design guidelines that say to the extent feasible, say stairs be on the side, or to the extent feasible, something else happens. I think that could be justified, but in a conservative approach, I think some communities are not even having things like that in there, just because it's not the same standard for a single family home. We don't ask for, you know, an entry to be put on the side or stairs to be put on the side. So I think, you know, to me, I'd like to either move quickly on this or say, you know, we have a bylaw in place, you know, 4 or 5 conditions in our bylaw can apply. The building commissioner is applying what can be allowed. And then we move on. I think, you know, the rules and regulations in the webinar didn't clarify, say, gross floor area, and if it's habitable space, if it's by building code or not. I think there's a few interpretations that towns will be doing individually. And so to me, the webinar didn't answer some of those questions necessarily. And so I think what we have for the most part, you know, is pretty good. I think, you know, a principal dwelling has to have at least 1 unit. So a number of communities are taking the approach and saying, well, they're limiting ADUs to single family homes and not to duplexes or things with greater number of units. I don't necessarily think that's in conflict with the rules and regulations or the legislation. You have to have setbacks that are as permissible as possible. So one of the new conditions in yellow, and the last one said if it's a detached structure, it has to have the setbacks of the principal dwelling. the rules and regulations the state put out say it has to be, or the accessory dwelling unit, whatever is more permissible. So right now we just allow it to follow accessory structure setbacks, even though it becomes, a dwelling unit. And so I wouldn't recommend necessarily putting that in there. I think they really clarified that in the webinar, and the rules and regulations do say that. I think sometimes it's just how it's interpreted, given there's a number of commas and phrases and ands or ors and what regulates what. But so if we, like I said, I think there's a few points that probably need to be worked on, but otherwise, what was in the packet could probably be considered ready to go. So, I think it's the student home definition, and then the condition, 14, 15, 16 were in yellow about, having things, the setbacks, and then to the extent feasible, having new entrances on the side. The last one is about non-conforming structures. And so essentially any non-conforming structure or property is allowed a protected use ADU. And right now we would say that it needs a special permit. And so the states in the webinar and in the rules and regulations, but the webinar and some of their documentation has basically said you can't have a special permit for that. And so that's different than how we would have interpreted it without some of the new guidance. And so what you could allow is a Section 6 finding, typically done by the zoning board, but not through a public hearing. It has to be a by right Section 6 finding that it's not more detrimental. And I've asked attorneys at KP Law if that's necessary, or if it could be done administratively, or if we just don't even do it, because it seems silly to make an applicant go to the zoning board. It's not a hearing. It's basically, then the zoning board can't really deny it because it's a protected use. So, why have it go to a zoning board if, they say, well, we don't like it, but we can't say no. It's an odd way to me to require this extra step if there's no kind of authority or power there. So other than that, I feel like, what we have in front of us is, in pretty good shape. Like I said, except for, a few questions.
All right. Jesse?
Thanks. Said a bunch of stuff pretty quickly. I think I would definitely support if we can limit this to just single family and not multi properties already. I would really like to, either now or some later point, learn why we think student home definition is going against this and what the wording is, and just, is it just semantics? Is it something we can still ask the state? I just need to explore that a little further at some point. The other things you've highlighted as maybe taken out, I don't have objection to at all.
Yeah, those are new things just from what, other bylaws I read, or, things that were being discussed. And I'm not necessarily advocating for the things in yellow, but I think the single family home is reasonable actually. And a number of communities are doing that. I mean, some of the communities in Western Mass or that I've seen in the state, they actually say things that are, not allowed. I mean, one is even going to a vote soon saying, the utilities have to be run through the main house. They can't have separate utility connections. ADUs are limited to 3 bedrooms and no more than 1.5 stories in height. And it's like, I don't know. I mean, what I've read from the legislation, the rules and regs, all those things you can't say. Yet here, this town is going to get this, try to be adopted in their zoning bylaw. And I just don't know why they would move forward with that when, those are things that the state has said a number of times you can't do. But I guess they're willing to do that. I'm not. But
yeah. Well, I mean, Jesse, one thing I could comment, and I had a couple of emails came from one of our town councilors who was kind of worried about the student home definition, that we were opening ourselves up to lawsuits. And she pointed out that in the CMR 71, which is the new regulation that the state has published, there's a line that says under prohibited regulations that municipalities may not institute a requirement that a protected use ADU be subject to a use and occupancy restriction.
Yeah, we've discussed that, and we're not.
Okay.
We're saying either or. we're not limiting the ADU. And it might be semantics, but
Yeah.
again, I think it's worth, in my opinion, this is worth exploring that route
Yeah.
for our town, right?
Yeah, so I
Alright.
mean, I think, the town attorney would say, they would want to protect the town from any liability or lawsuit and say, don't do it. And so then the question is, does the planning board think we still can justify it, through the CMR, there's, seven, what is it like, whatever it is, section 3A3, and it lists, three criteria that you have to justify a regulation by to determine if it's reasonable or unreasonable. And so if we were to move this forward, I think, like I said, we'd want to be able to say that it's objectionable, that it's actionable, it doesn't get in the way of the regulation, and it serves a municipal purpose and a public good. And so whatever that language is, have that ready as it would move forward through the zoning amendment process. And so, we can keep it in there for now, and maybe it's taken out at the end, but my guess is the attorney would say that it's, with the town's best interest, that they wouldn't recommend it. I will say the gross floor area is really interesting. The way the regulations work, they say attic, basement, all these other things that, for instance, you could have an unfinished attic that, has like, no more than 5 feet of floor height, and all of a sudden somehow that's used in the calculation to get a bigger floor area. Or, you have a basement that's really unfinished. I mean, it could be like a rubble stone basement, right? A dirt floor basement that is now counted as part of your denominator to get up to 900 square feet. And, a lot of building commissioners in the state are saying that that can't be what it's meant, right? Because by code, not, it's only habitable space is how you would calculate the living area, and then from that is where you get your square foot from your ADU. But the state is almost saying something otherwise, and it just seems really odd, like we've talked about before, that you could have a small house with an unfinished basement, but it's big enough to get you not to a 900 square foot ADU. But by building code standards, that would be, it might actually be the same size as the habitable space, and so it wouldn't actually be half the living area. And so I think some of the terms in the legislation and then the rules and regs are not consistent with building code terminology. And so I don't think it's really been clarified. And so if we like the definition we have, which is habitable space, I think we just keep it and we run with it. And I think a lot of communities are doing that. But it's something that'll probably be clarified through legal cases in the future.
Okay, Jesse?
So with that and the student home definition and other things, this has come up a few times over the last few months. What happened to the idea of just basically sending it to the state and saying, here's what we want to do, here's our justification, give us some feedback, rather than just being preemptively cautious. Again, I'm just one voice, planning board has to vote.
Or being preemptively aggressive.
Sure, but
I mean, if we're
I don't think
aggressive-
asking a question of the state is aggressive. It's asking a question, right?
Right.
If they say, sorry, no go, done. But
Yeah. So yeah, my thought would be after tonight, I wrote this as, a memo with the background, the request of the state, and then here's what we're doing. And so, if we think this is, fine, maybe we take out, I think these are somewhat redundant, 2 and 3 about, only on a single family, it's up here in the definition. I think I would just take out 15 here about the setbacks, because they've clarified that, but keep 14 and 16. If we think this is good, I would get rid of staff comments, and this could be then sent, so I would ask the planning board, if we think this is ready, I would just send it to the state after this meeting. And, whether or not we want to follow, they'll give us their opinions. We don't necessarily have to follow them. We can, like I said, we might need to then spend some time justifying some of these conditions. But, to me, it would be at this point, I would feel comfortable sending it. And, we can then take their opinion and move forward with it.
Yeah. Bruce?
Doug, I think we should be preemptively aggressive. I like that phrase. Because Amherst, as we've pointed out with that statistical document, or the compilation of our populations and so forth, is essentially an outlier. It's unique. So yes, I think we owe it to the town to be preemptively aggressive because we are in an unusual position, and I think if we can, if it's possible to have it interpreted this way, I think it's to our benefit.
So Nate, is there a person or a department you would send this to at the state? I mean, you know who to send it to tomorrow?
Yeah, I do. Yep.
Okay, and they are prepared to render opinions about things?
They say that. They don't give a time frame. I mean, it could be
Okay.
that, you know, they might be getting inundated with requests. I think a lot of communities now waited for the model zoning bylaw. And then I'm assuming now communities are where we are in a position to say, okay, we have this draft, let's have the state review it. But, you know, I think by, end of day Friday, this can have emailed to the state, and I've already asked the town's attorney to look at it as of a week ago, or, so I think we'd be in a position at the next meeting or so to say, here's what we think is a draft bylaw to recommend to council, or have the CRC look at it as well. They have looked at it a little bit, but we could, move it forward as a zoning amendment.
Well, I have no concerns with sending this off to the state and seeing what they say. Before we sent it to town council, I'd want to have more conversation.
All right, yeah, that works. Like I said, I'll probably take out the one about a detached structure having the same setbacks as the principal dwelling. They've clarified that that's really not, the regulations say otherwise. And so I agree. I just, like I said, sometimes the way the regulations are written, you might interpret it differently, but.
Yep. Well, I think it's close enough to send to the state.
Yep.
If we want to parse the terminology after that before we go to town council, we can do that. But
sure,
the sooner we get an opinion from the state, I think the better.
Sure.
Jesse.
I agree. I'm assuming you'll send along our justification with it, Nate? Yep.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yeah, no, thanks. Yeah, thanks for your patience. I really wanted that, the webinar, to see that and see what they came up with, because it could have been that, there's something completely new and we wanted to talk about it, but that wasn't the case. So I think we're ready.
All right. Great. Time is 9:41. All right. The second item under general housing was the discussion of the potential overlay in the North Amherst. I'd like to suggest that we postpone that conversation to another night when we're not so full, not so busy, and it's not so late. I got enough thumbs up that I think I'll take that as a yes. Okay, good. Nate, anything you have to say about that effort before we move on?
No.
Okay, great. All right. Did we lose? Oh, okay. Nate and Pam, anything about old business not reasonably anticipated? No. Okay. Anything for new business not reasonably anticipated? No.
No.
All right. Form A&R subdivision applications. Anything? I didn't see anything in the packet.
No.
I will mention, I think we talked about it on the 16th of April, the Shutesbury Road solar project. There was a preliminary subdivision plan that the board reviewed last year, and that has since expired. So they didn't submit a definitive plan within 7 months. And so they resubmitted a preliminary subdivision plan for basically the same thing. And, they can do that. And so that'll be heard in April. And so,
okay.
they're still, they're doing that to try to freeze the zoning. So it is literally the same plan that the board looked at.
Where is the zoning bylaw? Is it still buried in CRC?
The solar
bylaw.
It is, yeah. It's working its way through CRC to then be referred to council as a zoning amendment. So I'm not sure how many more meetings it'll take, but it's still working its way through. Yes.
Okay. All right, upcoming ZBA applications, anything?
I don't have
Right.
anything I want to report tonight. How about you, Nate?
I don't either.
Okay. Upcoming SPP, SPR, SUB applications? Nope.
Well, we have
Well,
a hearing on April 2nd.
yeah.
Amherst Youth Soccer is proposing a storage shed at Plumbrook Recreation Area. It's pretty minor, but you know, it's a new accessory structure, so it couldn't be approved administratively. I think
Okay.
that's it.
All right. Time is 9:43. Board, committee, and liaison reports. Bruce, anything for PVPC?
No, nothing to report.
All right. Jesse, anything housing subcommittee?
Nope, we failed to meet last week.
All right. Karen's gone, so we don't have DRB. All right. So report of chair. I finally have something to say in my report of chair, and that is to thank Johanna for running the meeting last time. I didn't get any complaints. I think I could just disappear and you could take it over from now on. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. And if it ever makes sense for me to chair a meeting and so that you can be more of a participant, just let me know. Happy to play that role as vice chair.
All right. Thank you. Any report from staff, Nate and Pam?
Well, you know, I usually mention the different reports that are ongoing. So we, you know, the housing production plan is moving forward. There's draft goals and strategies. The consultant provided just in the last week or so, maybe 2 weeks. I think the board will probably look at that in April. They've, you know, updated the needs assessment. So thanks for comments. And then I think we'll look at the goals and strategies. You know, ultimately the planning board and town council will need to vote to, I guess, approve it. And then, you know, we send it to the state for their review. And so we, you know, want to keep the board up to date on that. The Dotson and Flinker downtown design standards is continuing to meet, and they have some draft standards, and they have, you know, they have a working group, and so they're meeting. They met, I think, 2 weeks ago, and they're meeting shortly to keep reviewing those. But I think probably in April they'll become public, and so we'd ask for, you know, public comment on those design standards. The idea would be to try to wrap those up this year, and then, you know, yeah, I think that's those are two big ones that are happening right now.
Okay. All right. Anything else from anyone? All right. So our next meeting is April 2nd, did you say, Pam?
It is.
And we start at 6:30 as usual?
We do start at 6:30 as usual.
All right.
Oh, and I will say that hopefully tomorrow or this week, the state will allow the extension of remote meetings. So it will likely be, you know, a Zoom meeting. If something changes, we'll let everyone know. And if that's the case, it would be an in-person meeting. But we're, you know, I think everyone's optimistic that at least the remote and hybrid meetings will be extended. It'll just be an extension for 2 more years, and then, you know, they'll have to actually then do something in 27 is my understanding of it. It'll just be another 2-year extension, not an official change to the legislation, probably. But
Okay. Bruce, you had your hand up and then it went away.
Well, I was going to ask the same thing that Nate just said.
Okay. All right. All right. The time is 9:47 and we are adjourned. Thank you. See you in April.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. See you all in April.
Yep. Good night.
Recording. Yes.
Recording stopped.